Oh, as always, there's a glamour glare. Da, da, da. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. No, now I think we're actually live now. Right. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to my weekly medieval sewing party. I am the Contessa of the Creative Contessa, and as always, we will start with the traditional getting dressed. If you have any questions as we go through either the getting dressed in the 15th century process or throughout the course of this medieval sewing party, pop them in the live chat. And if the technology gods are willing, I will get to see your question and reply. Well, we already have a fun comment. We don't. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, I see. I understand. I get the picture. All right, so I will be getting dressed in the 15th century Burgundian French English style, second half of the well, actually sort of 1410s to 1470s style, more or less. And I will only be getting dressed more halfway, actually. I'm starting off already wearing the most essential undergarment for men and women up until the 20th century, basically, the smock. This would be called a smocca in English. In the 15th century, it would be called a chemise in French. It would be called a camicia in Italian, a hemd in German, a camisa in Spanish. This is not a gendered garment. I mean, the shape is different for men versus women, but the name is not. Chemise is French for all, men and women. Linen undergarment, smocca, is the word for a lot of the period until the 15th century. Then you start to see the word shirta appearing in English, referring to men's undergarments. But again, the feminine version in English is not chemise in the 15th or 16th or 17th century. It is smock. And the word shift, I know some of you like to talk about shifts in the medieval context, but that word is not a medieval word at all. The first time that this garment is referred to as a shift is in the end of the 17th century. And even in the 17th century, the word smocca is still used prevalently. So if you are referring to medieval clothing, not a shift, a smock in English, or if you want to pronounce it the 15th century English way, then smocca. So just going to go ahead and comb my hair. This is a very simple medieval comb. You can see it has wide tines on one side and narrow tines on the other. And its purpose is the wide tines are intended to get out the knots. And the fine tines are intended to remove detritus from your hair, as well as redistribute grease, the natural oils. Grease is pejorative these days. The natural oils from your scalp throughout your hair, and to remove any excess oils at the same time. So this was part of the medieval hair cleaning process. This was how medieval women conditioned their hair also by using the natural oils from their scalps, which, believe it or not, dear viewer, the oils that your scalp naturally produces are actually the best for your hair, no matter what big shampoo and big conditioner want you to believe. We have been brainwashed and conned since the Victorian era, actually, into believing that we needed to purchase all manner of artificial and synthetic compounds to take care of our bodies and hairs. In some cases, that is true because we live in a society with a lot of industrial pollution, and so we need solutions that can counter that. In other cases, it's not true. Yeah. So I'm now using the fine tines, and you can see just how shiny that makes my hair. Right? It also makes it fluffy. I have been doing a lot of very interesting reading lately, and today I was planning to share with you, remember if I brought my notebooks. I might have to have my condottiero bring my little green notebook. I was planning to share with you the origins, the etymology of some common modern sayings that have medieval origins, and talk about the actual underlying meaning of those phrases. A lot of phrases that we utilize commonly in modern English actually date back to Chaucer, and in some cases back to at least Alfred the Great. So there's some real history to a lot of the phrases that we use, idiomatic expressions that we utilize in daily speech. The caveat being that, of course, in many cases, the language itself has updated into modern English. So we're no longer speaking, pronouncing things the old or middle English or even early modern English way. But in essence, the phrase itself has survived centuries. Of course, because many of these phrases date back to the Middle Ages, or in some cases before perhaps, the original meaning has been lost. We understand its current use, but we don't understand why it means what it means. So I've got some fun expressions, and we will be exploring those as I continue my epic journey of garment repair together with you. And I might also do some finger loop braiding today. I brought some finger loop braiding supplies. You can never have too many laces in your kit as a medievalist. You just can't. We live in a world in which, medievalists anyway, people, reenactors, practitioners of living history, we live in a pinned and laced world, which means that we need to have a steady supply of laces to tie our garments together and pins to pin things to each other. And both of those items, laces and pins, are in essence disposable items. Laces do eventually break. They can sometimes be recycled into smaller uses than the original long laces, but sometimes they can't. And in those cases, that's when laces often ended up in the middens, because I guess laces weren't viewed as being something that could be turned into rag paper, for instance, or sometimes they were then used to stuff the walls of castles and homes for insulation. Hassan, good morning. Oh, Benevins, thank you. Thank you. It's very kind of you to say that. Okay, so I'm just doing a final comb through on my hair. Haas, are you watching? Are you watching from Facebook? So we just spent 3 lovely days in Busan in South Korea, and we visited on our last day Haedong Yonggungsa, a temple that was originally founded, a Buddhist temple that was originally founded in the 14th century at the end of the Goryeo era, and was rebuilt back in the 1920s and 30s. And we did a live tour of that. If you check that out on my travel channel, if you're interested in seeing a beautiful historic site right on the ocean. And one of the things we learned at that tour is that, things learned together, I suppose, is that things that may look old aren't necessarily old, right? Sometimes architectural styles are conservative. Okay, hair is all combed out, and now I'm going to braid it. Yeah, so remember, everyone, medieval women, pre-modern women, didn't leave their hair down. It was impractical. It was just impractical, because before the advent of electrical appliances, women and men were working with a lot of fire. Fire for cooking, fire for baking, fire for lighting the homes. And so you just don't want to have your hair down. You really don't. It is a bad plan. It's a way to catch on fire yourself. So aside from the fact that before the advent of chimneys, the spread of chimneys even, which most homes before the 17th century in Europe didn't have chimneys, it meant that homes were very smoky. And so your house, smoke is not just smoke. Smoke is ash. It is debris from the fire. And so it's dirty air. It is literally dirty air. And that meant that your hair, if you left your hair uncovered and out and down, it would get covered in grease and ash from the fire smoke, and it would become very disgusting very quickly. So, men and women tended to cover their hair in some fashion, women especially. And, this sometimes it was converted into a virtue of, oh, look how modest the ladies are. They're covering their lascivious hair. But really, it was more about practicality. It was more about keeping your hair covered so that you didn't have to wash it, because showers weren't a thing. You couldn't just hop in a shower every day. So doing a full hair wash every day would have been impractical for most people. especially with those ladies who had really, really long hair. Not all ladies did, by the way, because contrary to popular belief, not all women can actually grow seriously long hair. This is it for me. This is as long as my hair gets. It does not get longer than this. Everyone's genetics determine how long their hair will actually go. So no, not every lady just grew her hair down to her ankles. That was not a thing. It's not a thing now. It wasn't a thing then. And a lot of ladies didn't have thick, luscious locks, and so they actually utilized hair extensions. Seriously, hair extensions. Now, we don't know exactly necessarily how those hair extensions were incorporated into their hair. I haven't found any evidence positive about whether they were sewn into the hair. I'm talking Middle Ages, not ancient Rome, not the Renaissance, in the Middle Ages. So 14th, 15th century. I haven't found proof positive that they were sewn into the hair. We know that they were probably, at the very least, with hair taping. You could tape, bind extra hair into the braids with the hair taping process, but that's not necessarily going to make it really secure here at the top. So sewing seems likely, basically a weave, but I just haven't found the evidence positive of that. So always looking for evidence to support reasonable conjecture. I just don't assume that, the way something was done in ancient Rome, for instance, was necessarily the way it continued to be done into the Middle Ages. Yeah. Well, Hassan, there's no evidence of that, right? Like, not in Europe. I haven't seen evidence for sewing the hair in. So, we can't make assumptions. We shouldn't make assumptions. We should always look for evidence to prove or underpin our assumptions. Until then, it's just conjecture. Let me see. Comment. Kevin says, my granduncle told me how there were 14 in the house and no shower. The youngest got to use the bath last. Yeah, that is a more recent practice. I don't have evidence of, bathing based on age, who got to bathe first. But the reality is that you don't need to have a bathtub to keep your body clean, right? This is the eternal argument. Modern people think if you don't have a shower, you can't possibly be clean. If you don't have a bathtub, you can't possibly be clean. But you don't need a shower or a bathtub to clean your body. All you need is a bowl with liquid and a rag. And you don't even necessarily need soap unless you're dealing with particularly heavy-duty grease, right? So yeah, but bathtubs, medieval people did have access to bathtubs. They absolutely did. They had access to bathhouses, which had bathtubs. Now, they didn't, that doesn't mean that everyone had a bathtub in their home. No. A private bathtub in a private home would have been a massive luxury in the Middle Ages. So most of the population did not have bathtubs in their home. But that's why there were public bathhouses in the towns and cities that had that kind of population. And it seems that people went to the bathhouses about once a week. So yes, medieval Europeans were clean. They cleaned regularly. They washed their hands multiple times a day before, in the middle of, and after meals. They washed their hands and faces and certain parts of their bodies when they woke up every morning. They also brushed their teeth every morning, right? So medieval hygiene was a real thing, and it was common and widespread. And you don't need any of the modern technology they might have to maintain decent hygiene, contrary to what everyone wants you to think. Yeah, Hassan, you have Roman women sewed hair weaves into their hair, but you can never assume, remember everyone, I was just saying this, you can never assume that just because ancient Romans did it, that practice continued into the Middle Ages. And why? Why can we not assume that something the ancient Romans did continued into the Middle Ages? Because of the Justinian plague. The Justinian, it's actually not the barbarian invasions, as they're bombastically called, that kill Roman technology and Roman style civilization. Not at all. Because all of the Franks and the Saxons and the Jutes and the Angles and the Goth, all the different Goths, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, right? The Vandals, all of them were coming into the Roman territory because they wanted what Rome had. They wanted the trappings of civilization. They wanted amenities, running water, bathhouses. They wanted beautiful architecture. They wanted comforts. That's why they came. They didn't come because they just wanted space. They wanted space also. So before the Justinian plague, all of those various tribes, as they are sometimes called, those groups, they all kept everything going. They kept the lights running, or they kept the lights on, as it were, metaphorically speaking. They kept the bathhouses going. They kept the aqueducts flowing. What really killed ancient Roman technology and practices, what brought it all to a screeching halt, is the Justinian plague, which struck Europe in the 6th century, and over the next 150 years reduced the population by 90%, 90%. I don't know why this plague is never talked about, because it's worse than the Black Death in terms of percentage of people killed. And it is what really brings the Roman Empire to an end in terms of technology, because when you kill that much of your population, there is no more critical mass to maintain high tech. That's the problem with high tech, is you need a certain critical mass of knowledge. You need a critical mass of people to maintain it. So, 90% of the population dies over a 150-year period. And when it first hits, when Justinian and Theodora are in power in Constantinople, it's I think it's instantly like 30% died just right then and there. So that's what brings it all to an end, which means that we cannot assume in the least that the way people did things in the Roman Empire, anything, take any given thing, you can't assume that it just continued past the Justinian plague. So that's why I always try to find the evidence of practices from medieval sources, because I refuse to assume and conjecture that something done in the 2nd century in Italy is going to be the way people are doing it in the 15th century in France. Yeah. Deodorant is a good thing, though. So here's the actually, thank you for bringing that up, Dew. So here's the interesting thing. A lot of science is coming out to say that actually if humans eat the diet they're genetically supposed to eat, and wear natural fibers, then body odor is much less of an issue. So, we are basically poisoning ourselves with all of these synthetic chemicals and all of this super processed food and all of these synthetic fibers, right, that actually cause microbes to breed and put off that delightful smell that some humans produce. That being said, medieval people also acknowledged that some people had a stronger smell than was perhaps desirable. And so we have medieval recipes for deodorant. Deodorant is not a new thing, guys. It's not at all. Nope. It's not. And medieval people really worked hard to smell sweet. So not only did they have a deodorant that was specifically designed for armpits, was usually wine-based, they had a variety of sweet-smelling herb concoctions, ground herbs, powdered herbs that they would sprinkle in their hair and in their clothes and on their body. They had the wealthy actually did it with spices, right? And sometimes they would suspend them in oil and apply those sweet-smelling oils to their body and to their hair. So medieval people also had deodorants because they also wanted to smell sweet, more so than we do, in fact, because they thought that smelling bad meant you were going to catch a contagion. The miasma would come for you. You would catch the contagion that was being carried by the miasma, and then you would die. But if you smelled sweet, then you would fend off the bad smells, the foul-smelling air, the miasma, and therefore not die. So smelling sweet was not just a conceit, according to the medieval mind. It was an essential part of hygiene, of health, actually. Yeah, I almost never smell bad. I'm more sensitive to my own body odor than my wife is. Interesting. Let me see. Okay, just scrolling back through the comments. Facebook even has subtitles sometimes. Okay, well, I've got my hair braided, and now I'm just going to tie it into what I call the sloppy, dirty bun of conjectural bun of the Middle Ages. Normally, I should have a lady in waiting or a valet to do my hair, and it is possible that hair in France, Flanders, and England in this era was sewn up or taped up with ribbon, or possible that it was pinned up, although the pins that they have survived don't work in my hair at all. They just fall straight out. But we don't know because we almost never see women's hair as it's worn under a headdress. We only see women's hair we only see little parts peeking out, or their hair completely down if they're being depicted mourning. So there's a lot of conjecture about how exactly hair was put up in a bun. We know that it was, but we don't necessarily have proof positive outside of Italy how it was done. In Italy, we know they did hair taping. Hair taping is the way to put up your hair, whether you have your hair in braids and just want a wreath around your head, or later in the 15th century, they have this, really special style where it's taped in this swirl on the back of your head using ribbon. But that I have not been able to solidly document that technique to France, Flanders, and England. So, some other options again could be sewing. They could have just straight up sewn hair into a bun. They could have used, I have visual evidence of using dressing pins, but the dressing pins fall out of my hair. They do not stay in place. So that just doesn't seem very practical, especially if the lady actually moves. Yeah, so I'm always looking for more solid evidence. Oh, right, bling. I'm always looking for more solid evidence because I don't like to just assume. I have read the term miasma being used up into the American Civil War. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. So the comment is that the term miasma perseveres up until the American Civil War. So do most medieval and ancient manuals of health continue to be printed and earnestly referenced up until the 19th century. The 19th century is when there's a massive change in scientific endeavor, in how scientific endeavor is pursued because of the invention of the microscope and the further development of the telescope. And so we are able to perceive matter at a much finer, more granular level than ever before. And that creates entire new understandings of biology, which then creates an entirely new understanding of how to maintain health, right? So yeah, lots changes in the 19th century. That's when synthetics are invented for the most part, right? There's some synthetic materials, there are some synthetic materials that predate that, but the 19th century is when it really kicks off. We have things like celluloid, which are so flammable that ladies' hair combs made, it's the first plastic really, at least in the West. Celluloid, the first plastic. It's so flammable, and it looks like ivory. They can make it look like ivory, so it's like fake ivory. And so ladies on the lower socioeconomic end of the spectrum can then afford these combs for their hair that look like ivory, except they're so flammable that this tiniest spark from an oil lamp or a gas lamp or a fire sets it up, and the woman goes up in a very, very hot fire. So hot that it's more efficient than cremation was in the era, right? So, in the 19th century is where we really start to hardcore poison ourselves at a whole new level. And this is taking into consideration that we had thousands of years of using lead in everything. Yeah, celluloid. Check it out. Celluloid it's the first synthetic. Rosemary, yeah, it's the first synthetic. And it basically, it's the first plastic, really. And of course, like most new materials, when it comes out, it was super hot. Everyone wanted objects made out of celluloid, right? It was modern, and it was, so much better than everything that we had used before. Who wants those dowdy old natural materials when you can have the latest and greatest that science has to offer you, right? And, the consequences of manufacturing, the people who worked in the plants that manufactured, the factories that manufactured the celluloid items, they were getting, talk about cancer rates skyrocketing. Tommy Core says, I have a question about wool hats. Oh yeah, celluloid was also used in films, old films, and it was super flammable. Yeah. Tommy Core says, I had a question about wool hats. Great, I have an answer about wool hats. Are you talking about the Mad Hatters and how mercury was used in the hat making process to shape the hats? It was part of the felting process. I'm assuming. And yes, Deuce says celluloid was also used in dresses. It was. Dresses were also made of celluloid. And those dresses were super flammable, which is why my theory is that's the origin of spontaneous combustion. It's the celluloid, right? And it makes sense because the tiniest, most imperceptible spark will set celluloid aflame, and it burns really, really, really hot. Really hot. And so imagine a lady in, the 1870s wearing one of those dresses with all of the layers, and the celluloid catches on fire. She goes up like a torch. There is nothing for it. There is no way of saving her. Sorry. Ugh, cancel. I hate this. Okay. Hide message. The scene in Glorious Bastards where they set the cinema on fire was perfection. Yeah. Okay. Well, I am dressed enough for today's sewing party. As many of you who've watched my medieval sewing parties before, you will probably say to me, oh, but Contessa, shouldn't you be wearing another layer? Yes, there should be another layer that goes over top of this. This is technically underwear, everyone. This is a kirtle, right? This is underwear, and there should be another layer that comes over top of this. And I'm going to say it again for those of you who are new to the live stream. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying. I will say it again, that we know that this was considered underwear for women of good repute, and not just good repute, for women of the upper classes of society, because there are court cases detailing abductions. And in the details of the abduction, it says things like, Mistress Brewer was kidnapped from her home all naked. Okay, so then you think, well, she was naked, just skin, right? No. All naked in naught but her smock and kirtle, which tells us that in the 14th, 15th century mindset, this still counted as underwear, as not fully dressed. Now, you will see people working in fields in 15th century depictions wearing exactly this. They're peasants and they're working. The social rules don't apply to them. You see men in the fields in nothing but their smocks, in nothing but their shirts. And I mean, nothing but their shirts. Sometimes they're brays and their shirts, right? But they're working in the fields. That's a seriously sweaty, hard labor. The social niceties don't apply there, right? You will see sometimes women cooking or brewing or doing some kind of, women doing pottery in nothing but this layer, but they were in their underwear basically. So a lady of my stature should not really leave her demands, her private home, the private parts of her home, the private spaces of her home dressed like this. If I were to actually go out into the world in the guise of a comtesse, then I should be putting a gown, a goune, a robe, over top of this. And the robe is the gown that usually has a train, and you wear a big belt, beautiful belt around the waist with it, and it has the turn back collar, the V neckline, right? So that goes over top of this normally. If you want to see what that looks like, on my YouTube channel, I have an entire series of videos on getting dressed like a Burgundian countess, like a Burgundian princess. Right? It's about a 26-minute video from beginning to end. You can see the whole process of getting dressed from the skin out, including stockings, including the gown, including the headdress, including the hair, everything. And it's narrated from the perspective of a 15th century Burgundian countess. So it's very cleverly written with lots of details, primary source details, historical details about the garments. So if you want to check that out after the live stream, I can highly recommend it. Okay, I know they mandated wool caps for the working class during the Middle Ages in Ireland, in part to boost wool industry. Did they do the same in other kingdoms? That is not in the Middle Ages. That is a 16th century development, and that is not just, it's in England. That was an English thing. That was an English thing that to boost production. Ireland is not centralized, anything like centralized enough in the Middle Ages to mandate anything, really. And remember, medieval Ireland had the Pale, right? You had the Pale, which was the part of the English Dominion, and it's very small part, honestly, of Ireland. And then you had everything else that viewed itself as being in various levels of allegiance to the English crown or not. So there is no real central authority that could have really mandated something like that. I mean, you talk about the Brehon laws, but it's not, they didn't mandate wearing wool caps. It's in the 16th century that wool caps start to be mandated, and it is to prop up the English wool industry. So I don't think it's an Irish thing. I think it's an English thing being imposed on the Irish, but that was in England. And that's because the English wool industry was starting to flag in the 16th century. So that was an attempt to artificially boost the economy. Yep, England. And they were knit wool caps. Not just like any wool hat, knit wool caps specifically. Let me see. I don't know if this helps your question. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there is, King Henry got it there. I still use the term miasma. Yeah, so we still use the term miasma, absolutely, but no one thinks, at least I don't think anyone thinks anymore, at least not anyone I know, no one still thinks that disease is carried on the back of bad smells. Yeah, we still use the term miasma metaphorically, but in the Middle Ages, it wasn't a metaphorical term. It was a theory of medicine and of pathology. Yeah, 1571 is definitely not the Middle Ages. Definitely not. I don't care how you define the Middle Ages. For me, okay, everyone, the live stream just shut down. Okay, well, well, everyone, I have no idea what just happened. I got a notification that the live stream shut down. That was fun. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you stuck around. If you did, I appreciate your patience with the technology world that I loathe so much. Yeah, I just literally got a notification that said the live stream has shut down. WTF, man. WTF. Right. The Middle Ages does not begin at a specific time. It does not end at a specific time. I don't care what anyone thinks. For me, I mean, not like a date. It's not like 1202 on June 10th, 1501, the Middle Ages ends and the Renaissance begins. Okay. It did happen again. YouTube has been having some issues these past couple of months. I'm not the first. So Philip from Irish Medieval History, he told me that he was having this issue a couple of weeks ago, that the live stream just shut down midstream. No, we're not losing connection. It's not the internet. I think it's a YouTube thing. Anyway, the live stream shut down unexpectedly. Philip was having this issue too. Right. It's not like 1202 and the Middle Ages ends and the Renaissance begins. That is not how history works. How history works is that human development is a spectrum, but there are certain key developments that cause a shift in the era, in the way people think, in the way they act. And for me, the Middle Ages, as such, really ends with the Reformation. It's the Reformation that takes out what in most of Europe and is the key influencer, and that's the church. It's what changes the church, it's what changes in Western Europe from having one church to lots of different churches and some really crazy ones with some really crazy ideas, right? So for me, it's the Reformation that ends the Middle Ages. Yeah. End of the Holy Wars off. No, the Holy Wars do not end with the Middle Ages. No, they do not. No, they do not, because the Battle of Lepanto is viewed by Europeans at the time as being a Christian battle against the evil Muslims, against the Turks, the Saracens, right? So it's not even the end of Holy Wars is the end of the Middle Ages. And that continues until the 18th century in Vienna. So no, and then we just have different holy wars. Then we have religious wars. Then we have wars of religion. Then we have the Protestants versus the Catholics. We've got 30 years of gruesome warfare in the 17th century that lays waste to Europe, right? So no, it's not the end of holy wars. No, I wish that were true. It's not. No, that is not a thing that defines the Middle Ages uniquely. Yeah. Well, yeah, and so Rosemary says the Renaissance didn't hit everywhere all at once. And what we define as the Renaissance is not what people in the 16th century define as the Renaissance. So the Renaissance is an invention of the Renaissance. Right? How crazy is that? The Renaissance is an invention of the Renaissance. How meta does that get? But literally, it's a group of 16th century artists who get in Italy, second half of the 16th century, get together and decide. They write le vite, right? The lives of the great artists, and they decide that they are living in the Renaissance, and they decide who the great artists are. And for them, the Renaissance is only about art. It's only about art and architecture. It's got nothing to do with thinking. It's got nothing to do with philosophy. It's got nothing to do with humanism. They don't care about that. They're only looking at artistic technique and the way that people are depicted and the way that spaces are built. And for them specifically, anything that harkens back to the classical way of doing things is particularly Renaissance, is the rebirth. Because the Romans used to depict people in a very, very lifelike manner, really super representative and accurate, right? So for them, returning to that style of artistic depiction and therefore also the architecture of that era, that's the Renaissance. It's not about philosophy or theory or humanism or anything like that. And if you look at the Italies, look at them from the 14th, the 15th, and into the 16th century, the early 16th century, you're going to see that there's not a lot of Renaissance about them. All of the usual medieval ways of doing things are pretty much still in place. The laws don't change much. The structures of power don't really change much. You still have mercenary lords ruling over things, right? You still have more or less the same city-states, some of them getting bigger, some of them getting smaller. But it really doesn't change that much in terms of how daily life is experienced or lived for most people. It's not much of a Renaissance. So that's why I really don't I prefer to refer to something by its century rather than being medieval or Renaissance. But unfortunately, the algorithm does not favor that approach. The algorithm wants us to use catchy terms like medieval or Renaissance, and it prefers medieval over Renaissance, in case you were wondering. Videos that get tagged with the label medieval perform much better than videos that get tagged or titled anything with Renaissance. That's just the way it is. Hey, Jane, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. And as Rosemary says, in some places didn't get the Renaissance and it skipped to the Enlightenment. Yeah. Or, again, it depends on what you mean by Renaissance. For me, for instance, Catherine of Aragon is the last medieval queen of England because she operates like a medieval queen. She leads armies on behalf of Henry. She leads the armies to Scotland while she's bloody pregnant. Right? She leads armies to Scotland. She works as an intercessor queen with Henry. She works, she has her own lands. She has her own fiefdoms, basically. Fiefdoms is the wrong word, but she has her own lands that she controls, right? When Henry goes away, she takes things over. She operates like a medieval queen. She's the last one to do so. But everyone will say, well, Henry VIII is the first Renaissance Prince of England. But for me, Catherine of Aragon, his queen is the last medieval one. So, it's not necessarily a time, it's an approach to life. And depending on what aspect of life you may be referring to, it may or may not be Renaissance. It might be medieval still, even though it's in the time period of the Renaissance. History is just so much more nuanced than that. Unfortunately, the algorithm can go and eat itself, but I still have to abide by it. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Handsome, could you bring me a chair with a hand weight? I think I'm going to do some finger loop braiding. I'm not feeling like sitting down. I want to do something active, and you all like to watch me finger loop braid, so I think I'm going to do some finger loop braiding. I do have lots of things that need repairs, but yeah, I'm not going to get into modern politics or the modern dumpster fire that is the world, or the dumpster fire that is the modern world. I don't feel like going there this morning. I don't know about you all. I just don't have the spoons for it at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to be actually finger loop braiding some points for arming garments. So these arming garments are items of clothing that were worn by knights and other men at arms under their armor, hence arming garments. They nearly always had the same shape as the civilian version. Oh dear, okay. They nearly always had the same shape as the civilian version of the garment. So an arming doublet or an arming farsetto or an arming pourpoint would have the same shape as the civilian version, as the version that's not meant to be worn with armor, but it would have more reinforcement. It would have more different padding in different places, depending on the era. Right. And so when you have an arming garment, something that's going to be worn with armor, you need laces, points that are going to withstand the abuse that combat will basically impart onto the garments. And so instead of working in silk for arming points, I'm working in hemp. And we actually have some extant laces in hemp that have survived from the Middle Ages. Not many, because cellulose does not survive in the archaeological record very well at all. But we do have some hemp laces that have survived. And we know that there were people who specialized in making laces. It was nearly always ladies. It was actually the silk women. But silk women also worked in other materials when they were doing narrow wears. So they didn't just work in silk necessarily. So I've got this beautiful, unbleached, undyed roll of hemp yarn. I purchased this at Penzic. I don't know where the cover went. They're fantastic. They have a lot of really fantastic textile art supplies. So going to be making some points from this. Now, after we make this, we're going to be dipping these in melted beeswax to add extra reinforcement to them. So, because this is a nice heavy yarn, I do not need to double up the loops in order to make something that is strong enough to withstand the abuse of a lacing point. And with this, I'm going to be doing a round lace of 5 bows. And usually you lose about 10% of your length to a round lace of 5 bows. So you should I eyeball it depending on how long I want my lace to be. I make it about 10% longer than that, the loops longer than that, and that will give me roughly about the right amount of length for the lace. Is Ryan okay? He coughed. Yeah, Ryan. Ryan coughs all the time. He was in the US Army for 20 years and exposed to God knows what kinds of chemicals. So God knows what kind of respiratory ailments he has. He coughs all the time. That's normal. Some people say that women only started wearing hats during the Renaissance. Jacob, that's a good comment. It depends on what you mean by hat. What do you mean by hat? What defines a hat? What is the difference between a headdress and a hat? In medieval French, there is no difference. So, it depends on what you define as a hat. Women have been wearing headdresses for thousands of years. Men have also been wearing headdresses for thousands of years. If a hat is a garment that goes on your head that just sits on your head more or less by itself without needing to be tied or arranged in any way, then women have been wearing hats since, at least, and I say at least because I haven't looked back further than this in any kind of detail. Women have been wearing hats since at least the 12th century, where we have a thing called a fillet that is, and also a pillbox style hat that arises and it sits on the head. So no, women have been wearing hats for definitely longer than the Renaissance. Now, if you mean a hat with a brim, does a hat have to have a brim to be a hat? Well, hell, no one's wearing those before the 15th century anyway. Depends what you mean by a brim. But no, women have definitely been wearing hats since before the Renaissance, 100%. There are pillbox hats, there are fillets. There's even the so-called Robin Hood style bicocket in which women are depicted at the end of the 14th century when they go out hunting, which it doesn't mean they were wearing it every day as a regular item of garment, just that they did it when they went hunting. Okay, so I'm going to concentrate for a moment on setting up my laces.
Do you want the frame?
The frame.
To make the loops.
Frame. What frame?
I have a frame for the length that we need.
Oh, do you? Oh, apparently my condottiero has made a frame for the length that we needed. How convenient. I'll take this moment to drink some tea. No, tea, Camellia sinensis, is not authentic for medieval Europe. Medieval Asia, sure, 100%. They've been drinking tea for 2,000 years. Oh, okay. Apparently I have a frame. But Camellia sinensis did not make it to Europe until the 17th century. However, I'm still going to drink it because I love it. Tisanes were absolutely a thing in the Middle Ages. A tisane is an herbal tea, right? They absolutely steeped all kinds of leaves and blossoms, roots, especially for medicinal purposes, and occasionally even for serving to guests, as we know from the 1391 Ménagier de Paris, who provides several different recipes for tisanes for herbal infusions, infused water, that he suggests should be kept on hand for when guests come over, when you have company. Yeah, that's a great question. Some people say women only started wearing hats during the Renaissance. I also cough a lot and I'm not sick. Yeah. Don't forget to mention the Battle of Flodden. Henry's not happy about that, at least compared to his work in France. You're a looper. I am a looper. Who are your favorite people from the Middle Ages? Ah, Eleanor of Aquitaine, of course. Who doesn't love Eleanor of Aquitaine? Eleanor of Aquitaine is one of my favorite people. Christine de Pizan is another of my favorite people. You know, she's a self-made woman, basically, self-supporting writer, author, supports herself, and imagine this, supports herself as an author, as a widow, just from her writing and her feminist writings in the late 14th and early 15th century. That's uncanny. That is crazy. That is unbelievable to most people. But there it is. She survived her. She supported her family, her daughters, and I think her father also. She supported her daughters, though, definitely, through her writing. And she was invited to become basically a writer in residence in multiple different courts. She had multiple invitations to a variety of courts in the early 15th century. So she actually had her choice of where she could go and become a writer in residence. And she actually debated misogynist authors in the era who had nothing good to say about women and who wrote all sorts of polemic against women. She actually maintained correspondences with those men, debated them, and got them to concede her points. I mean, wow, talk about a role model. Yeah, so Eleanor of Aquitaine, Christine de Pizan, Margaret of York is an amazing character as well, especially considering, you know, what she had to put up with from her mad ex-husband, well, her mad deceased husband. You know, Margaret of York is a princess of York. She is Edward IV's sister. She marries Charles the Bold, the Duke of Burgundy, the last Valois Duke of Burgundy, in fact, and he dies stupidly in the Battle of Nancy in 1477, and she manages everything. She manages to sweep into this fractious Burgundian inheritance. Her stepdaughter, Mary of Burgundy, who was actually like her best bud, she manages to help Mary maintain her power, to help Mary become, you know, succeed to the ducal throne. And she manages to get her dower guaranteed. She gets all of her dower lands. She becomes Madame la Grande, one of the richest women in Europe in the 15th century and most powerful. She maintains her own separate court. She's a bibliophile. She's a major patroness of the arts and of illuminated books, especially. And, you know, she just sets up this wonderful life for herself in the fractious and tumultuous second half of the 15th century, despite all of the garbage that's happening in England at the time, right? She just sails on through. So yeah, there's so many very interesting women. Yeah. Also a sign of marriage to have your hair tied up. I could be wrong. So yeah, so marriage, having one's hair tied up being a sign of marriage, that's not a universal thing throughout the Middle Ages. That's not a universal thing throughout Europe. It depends on when and where you are. It seems that on a practical level, most women, once their hair started growing any length, they wanted it to be somewhat covered. In the 15th century in Burgundy, for instance, we see young ladies depicted, and they're not wearing a headdress, like they're not wearing the conical headdress, not a hennin. They're not wearing a mitre or a turret, but their hair is up in a ponytail, and they do have a band around their head and a little hood that actually still shows their ponytail. So their hair's not down, entirely, and it's not completely uncovered either. It's just not practical. When you grow your hair really long, it's just not practical to have it down and exposed in a world lit only by fire. Not practical, not desirable, not really something anyone would want to do once your hair starts growing long. So yeah, now we do know that in 15th century Italy, for instance, whenever you see young ladies who have their hair in a ponytail at the back of their head, and then maybe a long braid, or just the hair in just a big open long ponytail draping down their back, they are unmarried. They are unmarried. In Florence specifically, once you got married, you put your hair up and you covered it in some way, unless you were going out to a ball, a big public spectacle, and then you didn't have to keep your hair covered because your hair would be decorated in jewels and beautifully coiffed, and the point was to show the power of the family into which you had married, and so you became a living doll, basically. So of course they're not going to cover your hair for that. They want everyone to see your beauty and the wealth that is their wealth and power that is their family. But those were special occasions. Otherwise, yes, in Florence in the 15th century, once women got married, they put their hair up and they generally covered it in a variety of veiling and kerchiefs. But it's just, you just can't make a blanket statement like that for the Middle Ages, because Europe is not a monolith. The 1,000 years of the Middle Ages is also not a monolith. So just keep that in mind. Let me see. It also tangles and mats and gets in the way. Yeah, Rosemary, exactly. If you just leave your really long hair down, it tangles, it mats, it gets in the way. It will catch on fire possibly, and it will get dirty. It will get dirty. In a world lit only by fire, we started off with this actually, and we'll circle back to it now since we're talking about it. In a world lit only by fire, your hair will be covered in ash and grease from the smoke from your fire. So you just don't want that. So yeah, you want to keep it braided, you want to keep it covered, you want to keep it up, no matter your age or your marital status, basically. I don't want to regret my life choices here. Okay. Let's see. This is a thing. Camera angles. Oh, over here, in case you're wondering, is my pile of things to be repaired. Sip of tea before I dive into this, because basically, once you get started with a finger loop braid, either you have someone take your spot and hold the loops for you, or you finish it. Because if you drop the loops in the middle, you're never going to pick it back up where you left off, ever. Comment, hair also gets hot and itchy when it's down in the summer. Yep, also that. Oh, Duncan, wow, thank you for becoming a member. Really appreciate that. Yeah, so I'd like to take this moment then to thank my members, like Duncan, for instance, and Tomikor, and Takeda, and Twitchy Witch, even though she's not there at the moment, right? I'd like to thank all of you. Erin, you're out there somewhere. Thank you for being members of my channel and for supporting my living history research and work and sharing that with you all financially. I really appreciate that. I'd like to thank my patrons as well. You know who you are. Also, I haven't seen any of you in the live stream tonight, I don't think. But if you're a patron or a channel member, go ahead and give a shout out if I haven't noticed you yet. Yeah, really appreciate all of you being willing to put money in my hands to keep up these efforts. Tomorrow I have a medieval cooking party planned. So we will be making, and originally I was going to do another Lenten dish. And I think I might still do a couple of vegetable Lenten dishes, because you may have noticed there's not a lot of vegetables in these medieval cookbooks. But tomorrow I've decided, because I have boneless leg of lamb in my fridge, it needs to get used. And I found this amazing 16th century Persian recipe from the Safavid court that is stuffed roasted lamb. And the stuffing is, it spoke to me. The stuffing is all these amazing, delicious dried fruit and spices, and it just sounded so good. And I can just imagine how delicious this is going to taste. So tomorrow we're going to be making 16th century Persian stuffed lamb, as brought to us from the court of Shah Abbas the First, or Abbas the Great, he's sometimes called. And we'll talk about the source for that tomorrow, the cookbook from which the recipe was taken, and I'll be providing you with a translation of the original recipe. I do not read Farsi or Urdu in any era, so I will have to be relying entirely on this individual's translation. But we will be talking about 16th century Persian cuisine in tomorrow's medieval cooking party. So if you're interested in seeing the process of working through a recipe, of reconstructing a recipe from an original historic source, then please do join us. I think I also found a recipe not in the Safavid court recipe, but I found actually a whole bunch of Lenten recipes in the Registrum Coquine, from which we cooked our dish last week. And I was really fascinated by that, because one of them was a recipe involving hemp seed and hemp milk as a substitute for milk during Lent. And I haven't looked into it in depth, but I'm going to bet that hemp seed in the Middle Ages was much more affordable and easily procurable by the average person than almonds were. So I'm going to bet that hemp milk was a great alternative for Lenten fasting for the average person. For the majority of the population, almond milk being a luxury item. So that was a discovery yesterday as I was reading further through the Registrum Coquine, that hemp milk is a thing, and that hemp seeds being used in a dish like grain were also a thing, and particularly during the Lenten season. So if I can get some hemp seed by tomorrow, we might explore that recipe as well, because I'll be honest, the lamb roast is not complicated. Basically, we have to pound out the meat so that it becomes more rollable, and then fill it with this stuffing. The stuffing is not complicated to make, and then it's just going to take a long time to roast. So while that is roasting, we could be making some other things together as well. And the other really fascinating thing I learned in reading the 16th century Persian recipe for this roasted lamb, is that they did dry salt brining. So the recipe actually says, so the recipe is for a whole lamb. I can't get whole lamb here, but I did get boneless leg of lamb. So we'll be modifying a bit, but I think that'll be more accessible for most of you anyway. But the very interesting thing is that the recipe starts off with rubbing the inside and the outside of the lamb in salt and letting it sit overnight, and then stuffing it the next morning and sewing it up and roasting it in a clay oven, basically, probably a tandoor-like thing. But I don't have a clay oven, sadly. So we will be working with my modern oven, and we will be using boneless leg of lamb, but I will be doing the dry salting tonight so that it will be all ready for tomorrow. But that's really, I love finding evidence of techniques that we now use in the modern kitchen in these historic cookbooks, because it shows just how connected we are to our ancestors, how connected we actually are to the past, how despite all of the progress we think we've made, there are some things that have been known for a long time, and maybe we're not that much smarter than our ancestors as we might like to believe. Dry salt brining has so many benefits, because if you do it overnight, the salt penetrates, and it will actually help retain moisture during the roasting process. So this is a great way to be able to roast meat at any temperature, but especially a high temperature, and it will stay juicy and moist. So you get the benefits of high temperature roasting, the Maillard effect, for instance, but you don't have the detriments, which would normally be a loss of moisture from evaporation, because the salt actually binds with the water within the meat tissue and retains it, because salt is hydrophilic, right? So yeah. Oh, good night, Duncan. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. Oh, Stargazer, you're there. Oh, welcome back. Good to see you, my dear. So tomorrow's medieval cooking party will be a 16th century cooking party in part, but also probably some 15th century stuff as well. There are a lot of yummy recipes in this 16th century Safavid Persian cookbook. So, we'll probably be doing, I might just stick to just the Persian cookbook, and then next week we'll do some of the Lenten dishes from Regis from Kokine, because I don't think I'm going to be able to find hemp seed by tomorrow. But I am excited to try making hemp milk and see what it tastes like, and to make this hemp seed dish, because hemp seeds have lots of health benefits. So, it's exciting to find this 15th century Italian recipe involving hemp seed. I've never seen hemp. Darn it, got distracted, dropped a loop. No, it's okay. It's only arming points. They don't need to be pretty. They need to be practical. Anyway, I haven't seen any, I do a lot of cooking modernly as well. And I have my whole life. Cooking and food is a religion in my family. So I have never seen it. I've spent a lot of time in Italy. I have never seen hemp seeds be in any recipe. If you know of any modern Italian dishes that regularly use hemp seed, I'd be interested to hear about that. And maybe, there's a lot of really regional dishes that don't really make it outside of their region in Italy. So that could be. Eddie, if it's not exciting, you can go elsewhere. Seriously. You don't have to be here. But also, you do realize that you're supporting my channel by making the comment that this is not exciting. So kissies to you. Thank you for your support. That's the funny thing about people who leave deleterious or hateful comments in either the live stream or the comments under a video. By doing that, those people are supporting that creator. They are promoting, they're helping that channel grow, because YouTube doesn't care about negative engagement. In fact, it relishes negative engagement. So to YouTube, all these social media platforms, they don't care if your comment is negative or your comment is positive. You left a comment. So if you don't like a creator or the video, your best bet is to not do anything. Don't hit the thumbs down. Don't leave a negative comment, because by leaving a negative comment, you are telling YouTube that this is something that you will engage with. And so they will show you more of it, and they will promote that channel. So all of these miscreants, these jackanapes who have left all manner of absolutely improper comments under my videos on all my channels, by doing so, they've actually helped my channel grow. Isn't that fun? Yeah. And what's exciting is relative, right? I don't like exciting movies. Actually, I fell asleep during the invasion of Normandy in Saving Private Ryan. I fell asleep. I woke up the second the movie got quiet. I think it was about 20 minutes. The invasion itself is about 20 minutes long. Yeah, I awoke the second the loud violence was over. So I don't like action movies. Which means I don't watch very many Hollywood movies from the last, 20 years. Yeah, learning is exciting to me too, Tanya. Thank you, Tanya. Learning is very exciting to me. Speaking of channel supporters, Tanya, thank you so much. I get excited. I get giddy. What was I reading yesterday? I was reading something. Ryan, are you still there? Did you leave? I guess he left. I was reading something, and I made him, we were listening to Santa Clarita Diet while we were working on projects, and I was reading up on some topic for today. And I got so excited about this thing I learned in this one sentence that I made him stop everything so I could share it with him. I mean, that's how excited I get by new knowledge. I get giddy. I want to tell everyone about it. Do you have a book you recommend? A book? Oh my God. I have my own private library, literally. We actually have a digital card catalog, and we have cataloged all of our books. Do I have a book I would recommend? Jesus, what do you mean? Be more specific. If we're talking fiction, I really like Guy Gavriel Kay, The Lions of Al Rassan is an excellent book. It's a fantastic fantasy telling of the tale of El Cid. Makes me cry every time I read it. Now I'm starting to get choked up just thinking about it. If you're talking about, historic literature, like literature that is from the Middle Ages, goodness, if you want to laugh hard, Boccaccio's Decameron is full of politically incorrect, funny folk stories. Be warned that 14th century mores are very different from modern mores. So you will have to just be prepared for things that might offend modern sensibilities. But if you let yourself relax, you'll laugh really, really hard. And also get an idea about what medieval people thought was funny and actual real medieval society and real medieval people and how they lived their daily lives. Let's see, if you're looking for something more esoteric, Il Commedia, what we now call the Divine Comedy, but it's not an easy read. It's a long read. I mean, you've got hell, purgatory, and paradise, so it's quite a bit. But it's a dream quest, so it's pretty typical in terms of someone falling asleep and then awakening in a place where they then go on this allegorical journey of discovery, right? Yeah, so there's, it depends on what you mean by, if you give me a topic or you give me, fiction versus nonfiction, I can give you lots of book recommendations. I really like, for the Decameron, I really prefer John Florio's 1620 translation, because John Florio was an Italian Englishman. And I mean that one parent was Italian, the other was English. So he was bilingually Italian English, right? He natively bilingual, sorry. He was natively bilingual. And he actually he wrote an English-Italian dictionary and published it in the early 17th century. And then he did an English translation of the entire Decameron in 1620. And he writes it in a delightful Shakespeare-style English. And so it just has so much flavor. The translation isn't necessarily always perfectly correct or the most faithful, but it's the most fun to read because of the way he writes in that early 17th century English style. It's fantastic. John Florio's translation of the Decameron is my favorite. Every other translation I've read is kind of, doesn't have flavor, it doesn't have character. But this English translation, she's flavorful. She is zesty. She is spicy. Yeah. And you're going to learn all kinds of fun 17th century words. Like that's where I got the word the expression turkey rug from, because he talks about doing things on turkey rugs all the time. And that is the 17th century English term for what we would call Persian rugs now, right? I would like to see you spinning wool sometime. Do you have a wheel? I do not have a wheel. Wheels, so wheels are not, there's a walking wheel. So the medieval spinning wheel is something called a walking wheel. They didn't have sitting spinning wheels where you sat and pedaled with your foot, in my era anyway. That's a later invention. So they had this thing they had drop spindles and they had walking wheels. And the walking wheel is called that because it's big and you literally walk forwards and backwards while spinning the yarn. I've never used a spinning wheel of any kind, let alone a walking wheel. So that's not a skill I currently have. I have done drop spinning. I've done a little bit of it. I'm not good at it because I haven't devoted any time or energy into getting good at it. But yes, spinning wheels are a post-medieval. The spinning wheel that most people associate as being a spinning wheel or identify as being a spinning wheel is a post-medieval invention. Rumpelstiltskin was a lie. No, I don't know I actually don't know when Rumpelstiltskin was written, the original story. I don't know its original date. I mean, the Grimm's fairy tale version is early 19th century. So That's not a medieval story. You have to remember that a lot of those fairy tales are adapted and folk tales, fairy tales, whatever you want to call them, they're adapted over time to reflect the more current way of doing things. They don't necessarily retain their original historical references. But I also don't know if it's necessarily a spinning wheel or if she's just spinning. If she's just spinning fibers. I haven't looked at the original in a long time, but it might not be a spinning wheel she's using. It might be a drop spindle, guys. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about your cap? I think there's a video about it on your channel, but I believe it's members only. Also, I adore these live events. It's a bit like sitting in sister's room. Thank you, Pin Harris. That's the whole point. That's the point, is that I'm hoping you all feel like we're all together, just chatting, mostly me chatting, I guess, and you guys chatting in the live chat, and we're, getting creative together and just having fun. That is the point of this format. Also, because AI is, being used to produce all kinds of garbage, I'm hoping that this live format allows you to see something that's real. And hear someone who's real, and hear actual things coming out of an actual person's mouth, and see a person doing actual things for real with not a single bit of filter or modification to it. That's another reason I'm doing them. Harp, thank you for joining us today. Let me see. Pardon, catholique or chrétien? Je suis catholique. Soy católica, sí, pero, yeah. Are you one of the Shakers? No, I am not one of the Shakers. No, the Shakers were a 19th century sect, and they would have worn 19th century clothing. No, I am dressed in 15th century French, Flemish, English style, more sort of 14th, with this style of headdress that I'm about to talk about, more the second half of the 15th century. This is called a kerchief in French, a couvre-chef in French. I don't know what the Dutch name for it would be, the Flemish name for it would be. And it's basically consists of two parts. It has the part that frames the face, and then, the kerchief in the back, and it ties up and on your head. I actually have a video demonstrating how this goes on, or you can rewind back to the beginning of the video, earlier part of this live stream later on, and see how it goes on. Yeah, but it's very, very simple. It's starched, although this one needs to be restarched. They're often starched, and these were worn mostly by women who were working, or by, where'd my frame go? Or by noble women in the privacy of their own quarters, right? So this was not something a noble woman would have worn out and about. If I were to actually go out and about, I should therefore have actually a whole headdress going on, either a turret or a mitre or some other version of that, right? It should be with a veil over top of it, very, very fancy, right? I'm in what I call 15th century Lululemon right now. Yeah, so it's these things are super practical. I often spend my whole day dressed this way, because after I get dressed for one of these live streams, it's morning my time, I'm in Korea. After I get dressed, I'm done. I'm not changing. I'm not putting on another outfit. This is it. This is how I'm going to be dressed for the whole day. And so that means that when I go out to go to the restaurant, go take a walk, go to the grocery store, go meet up with friends, I don't care. This is how I'm going. Sometimes I teach an occasional English lesson to a friend. This is how I go dressed. And so that means I wear the kerchief also, because it's actually super convenient. You don't really have to worry about your hair, right? You don't have to style it. You can just toss it in a bun on the back of your head and go. So this is really effective at helping keep your head warm in the wintertime when it's cold outside. But in the summer, it's effective at helping you stay cool, because it keeps the sun off of your head. And because it's made of linen, evaporative cooling happens. So it is a shame this ever went out of style, because it's super easy. It is so easy to put on. It is so easy to take off, but it also stays on your head, like, right? Notice it's not going anywhere. right? So it stays on your head. No pins, nothing. Just the ties over the head are enough to make it stay in place, and the way it's balanced and it stays in place. That this ever went out of fashion is just a crime. Because it is such and it's so flattering, right? It's so cute. Look at the way it frames my face. And if it's sunny outside, really sunny, haha, reduces the glare massively. It is really impressive how much, if it's really bright outside, it is really impressive how much pulling the frame, the hood part forward, how much that actually reduces the glare. So this is also like medieval sunglasses as well. Yep. And it's made of linen. They were always made of linen. They would not have been made of cotton. We have no evidence of them being made of cotton. Cotton was a luxury fabric in this era. Cotton fabric was, and cotton batting you could get in stuff garments with, but it's a luxury fabric because it's imported. Cotton is not grown and made in Europe in this time, not in mainland Europe anyway. So it's an import. So it was expensive. Oh goodness. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to apologize if I missed any of your comments. Oh, gracias, señor Penguino. Gracias. Let me see. In some spindle spinning discussions, I've read the drop aspect is perhaps more modern. Apparently, most illustrations show the spindle being twisted in the hand and then being twisted, then the yard wound around. Maybe. I haven't looked into it that deeply because I'm not into that aspect of textile production. That I have read that also. I have read that debate also, but it's kind of a debate. There are depictions though. I mean, there are depictions. I've seen depictions from the 14th and 15th century of women with drop spindles in their hand, and they're holding the spindle is pretty low down from where they're holding the thread, and they're not spinning the spindle. So I don't know. Maybe could be. Oh goodness, I missed a lot of, sorry about this. I've missed apparently a lot of discussion. Oh goodness, okay. I was thinking that the fold could be a shade. Linen is the best. Yep. Yeah, so yeah, this absolutely does work as a great way of keeping the sun out of your face. And it's amazing how much light how much glare this reduces, right? Without sunglasses, without spectacles that are actually physically blocking the light directly to your eyes, this reduces the glare so very, very much. It really is. It's quite amazing. Okay, next set of laces are tied, and here is what we made, just finished. Right. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So next set of laces. Oh, I might be able to get the end of this one out, or did I just cut it? I did cut it. I shouldn't have done that. I should have pulled it out. That was dumb. Okay. Well, that's my mistake. I was talking to you all and not paying attention to what I was doing. That's on me. Will we add points, the chapes later? Yes. So here is how, so chapes are the metal points that go on the end that make it easy to use these and actually push them through the holes in your garments. Those are added by pointers, or were added in the Middle Ages by pointers, who were a special profession in and of themselves. And the metal points were not made in advance. They were made directly onto the lace so that they fit the lace perfectly. So now, unfortunately, you know, if you as a living reenactor or practitioner of living history or cosplay or whatever, if you want to have the metal points on the end of your laces, unfortunately, you generally have to just buy the pre-made points and then somehow squeeze your lace into that point and hope it's more or less the right size. But that's not how it was done in the Middle Ages. It was the metal sheet was formed directly around the end of the lace so that it fit perfectly. And that was its own profession. That's where the name Pointer comes from. If you have the last name of Pointer, it probably means that at some point you had you are descended from men who used to make the points that went on these laces. And it was a very important profession. It was a very, very, very important profession in the Middle Ages because everyone's clothing was held together. What the heck happened here? Everyone's clothing was held together by these laces, right? Laces here, laces in some cases by the 15th century, end of the 15th century, holding sleeves on. Laces would, oh, wow, I got a mess here now. Something happened while I was talking to you all. I didn't pay attention to what I was doing. Normally, I don't have to pay close attention, but apparently I did here. Laces would be used to attach armor to your body. And this is something that a lot of people get very, very wrong when they're doing medieval armor and combat. They strap their armor onto their body with straps, but it wasn't strapped on with straps. It was pointed directly to your arming garment so that the metal pieces and the mail was too, especially by the 14th and 15th century, the mail was pointed to your arming garments, and then the metal pieces were pointed to your garments over top of that, so that your armor wasn't hanging on your body. Your armor became one with you because it was part integrated into the garment that fitted your body perfectly, like a glove, right? And so you needed points for that, and you needed good points for that. And that's what this is called. Once you add the chapes onto this, it's called a point. That's what they're labeled as in 15th century English in the inventories and the expense accounts. These are called points, right? So it's not just, the point is not just the chape, that's a chape. The point is actually the lace with a chape together. That's what they're called. I had to ditch my sleeves at a Renaissance fair in order to tie up my friend's breeches. Yeah. Yeah. And hosen, that's it. For men, their hosen were not belted on. That's, from the 12th to the 16th century in Western Europe and many parts of Eastern Europe as well, men didn't wear trousers. They didn't wear pants, as we would call them, that were held up by belts. No, their hosen were pointed to their garment, either to their brays, their breeches, their underwear, up until about the 14th century. And then in the 14th century, they get pointed directly to their kirtle, their coat. That's on their pourpoint, the thing that is for pointing things to it. And that's how they were supported. And that, of course, is never, ever depicted in Hollywood because God forbid a man not look sexy in leather trousers, right? You can't be a manly man unless you're wearing leather and thigh-high boots or riding boots at the very least. And hosen are just not manly. Not manly at all, at least according to Hollywood and all of these modern show producers. I pulled on this and now I've got to redistribute. Okay, well, nothing else for it. Time to redistribute this set of laces. I might futz with this later. I'll just do another one. Yeah, we tied his breeches to his sword belt. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's that is not super awesome. To his sword belt. Jesus. Was he not wearing a doublet like he should have been? Naughty, naughty, naughty. Yeah, it's not until the 17th century, that you actually, and it's during the reign of, specifically of Charles II, that they design pants that no longer point to a doublet. So yeah, all of these movies where there's medieval and or Renaissance men running around in nothing but breeches that somehow magically hold themselves up, they do not. They will slip down unless you have a really big ass. Then they might stay up. I guess it depends on your ass. If you've got one of those nice round bubble butts, then probably your hosen will stay up. But if they won't and you don't have them pointed to a doublet, then they're going to fall off. Eventually. Strawberry, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. His doublet is special. I'm redoing the buttonholes. Special. I feel like I know I can't get tone necessarily from words, but I feel like the word special is like, that's a special kitty. Um, but kind of special. Oh, goodness. His britches were too big. Gosh. Yeah, then. Yeah, bubble butts for the win. So for those just joining, welcome to my medieval sewing party. I am the Contessa of the Creative Contessa, and I'm just doing some lace making today. Lace making in the medieval sense of that word. For those who don't know, what we now call lace is a relatively modern invention of the 16th century. Possibly the tail end of the 15th century, but most evidence points to 16th century. And what was lace before bobbin lace was what I'm working on right now. And the reason that we call what is actually bobbin lace just lace is because the original bobbin lace was just a slightly fancier version of the so-called finger loop braids. Right? We actually have finger loop braiding patterns. You've got a loop. I use my fingers to braid. We actually have extant finger loop braiding patterns that will produce a lacy looking trim. And I have demonstrated some of those before. I don't have the book, Take 5 Bows Departed With Me, but maybe on our next medieval sewing party, I'll specifically introduce some of those more lacy braids. Ones that actually do look very frilly indeed. So that's why we call bobbin lace lace. And it's also why some of you may never thought, why do we call shoelaces shoelaces? It's not very lacy. That's because that retains the original meaning of the word lace, which is just a tie that is used to lace things together, because it comes from the 13th century French lacer is where the word comes from, which is to tie things together, to lash things together, for instance. Let me see. That odd black, this odd black leather that looks like a pair of motorbike trousers after 10 years and no color. Let me see. What is the geographical range of reenactment for you? Is it expanded by the need to move for your companion's work? Oh, yeah. So, yes, you mean in terms of the geographical range of what I do? Yeah. So I have absolutely, because the US military sent us to Korea, although we volunteered to go, but because we have spent a lot of the last 12 years in Korea, I absolutely have. That definitely inspired me to start exploring historical Korean fashion and historical Korean material culture from what would be for us the medieval period, and in the case of Korea, a little bit beyond to the mid-Joseon era. Yeah, absolutely. I am fascinated by all cultures and all histories and all historical fashion and all material cultural history. It's just a question of, I'm immortal. I have limited years on this earth, and so I can't do it all. If I were immortal, God, I would never get bored as an immortal. I really wouldn't. I don't understand people who think that immortals must develop this chronic, fatal version of ennui after, a couple of 100 years on this planet. I wouldn't. There would be no ennui for me. There's always new things to learn. So, yeah. So right now, I explore, I'm mostly focusing on 15th century Italy and, Burgundy, just because of my limited lifespan. And also, of course, I am exploring and researching pretty heavily medieval and early modern Korean fashion. It's harder to do though, because most of the resources are written in Korean still. There's lots of them though. There are way more resources for the study of historical Korean fashion than there are medieval fashion and early modern fashion than there are for the study of European fashion. That's frustrating, but they're all written in Korean. So that's a bit of a challenge. My Korean is not up to academic level, but I am finally starting this great research project whereby I am going to museums here in Korea and examining extant garments in person. My next appointment is March 24th. And that has already, my first appointment was back in December, and that was an amazing experience and already taught me so much about the differences between 16th century Korean tailoring techniques and sewing techniques and the equivalent ones that were being utilized in Europe. It's fascinating. So yeah, my current range definitely includes a lot of historical Korean garments and the desire to make them and reproduce them and wear them. And that certainly has been influenced by where I live. I feel like wherever I live, I should take the effort to understand that culture's history and to try to recreate it in part, at least the beautiful parts of it. That's just, that's the benefit of living in a place, is that one can do that much more easily than if one is not living in that place. So yeah, 100% good question. Yeah, and seeing, let me tell you, holding, there is something spiritual, and maybe literally spiritual, possibly if you believe in ghosts, about holding a 600-year-old garment in your hands and looking at the stitches that were made by a woman who lived 600 years ago. You are with, those stitches probably don't retain the oils of her work, because those garments, mostly the ones I looked at, were laundered for certain. But in the case of the silk garments that were not wet laundered in any case, you might actually be touching the same places that a seamstress 600 years ago touched. And at the very least, you're touching a garment that was definitely worn on the body of a woman who lived 600 years ago. And so there are echoes of her encased in those fibers. And there's something really moving about that. Beyond the technical aspects of examining the kinds of finishes and seams and stitches and the construction, the order of operations for construction, beyond that, being able to touch a thing that was worn by someone who's been dead for centuries is really profound. It just is. Also jealous, what is your academic background? Well, my academic background, I just have a bachelor's degree, but I've been doing independent study my whole life, basically. And, I've connected with people who can get me access to these things. I'm collaborating with Dr. Minji Kim. She is an expert in the history of Korean fashion, world-renowned expert. And I actually reached out to her almost a year ago with questions because she wrote this fantastic book called A Dress History of Korea. And I had questions that weren't addressed in the book because books can only address so much. And she was so amazed by my question. Okay, we're back. We're back, I think. Are we back? Technology. I don't do medieval living history because I love modern technology. Anyway, she was so impressed by my questions because I was asking about really deep level knowledge about the construction of these clothes and the history of these garments, that she decided she wanted to collaborate with me to answer these questions, because even she couldn't answer these questions. And she is currently at the Fashion Institute in New York as a professor for the semester. But her family is from Daegu, which is where we stay when we're in Korea. And so when she came this winter to visit on her annual visit to her family, we actually went out and went to some museums and some special exhibits together. And we went and examined garments in the Daegu Museum's collection together. And so we're working on this research project together, which is to determine the order of operations, in what order 16th and 17th century Korean garments were actually constructed, and the seams and the finishes and all of that, what kinds of stitches were used, interlinings, those sorts of details. So we are in the process of working on that. And that's a long-term project. That's not going to be done this year or even next year. Yep. Am I making cord? I am making a lace. Yes. So I'm doing this technique that I'm applying here. This is called finger loop braiding. And it's called that because I have loops that go around my fingers, and then I use my fingers to braid them in different patterns. This dates to this one is specifically from two different 15th century braiding manuals. It's called a round lace of 5 bows. And this kind of thing was called a lace in the 15th and 16th century in English, and 17th century as well. Back then, lace that was not made this way was called a different kind of lace. Yeah. And this is hemp yarn, and it will be used for arming garments to basically point armor to an arming garment. So that's why I'm making out of hemp and not silk. Also, you can probably see it better than if I were making it out of silk. Yeah. But yeah, my research into historical Korean clothing, it's already just taught me so much. For instance, medieval European garments, the few extant ones that we have, they're never bag-lined. Never bag-lined. They are always flat-lined, right? And bag lining doesn't really make sense. It's not the best form of lining. And yet, especially before the invention of sewing machines, bag lining doesn't make sense because you're literally sewing twice as many seams. And yet, all of the garments I've seen this far, all of the jogori, even the skirts, they are bag lined. They're bag lined. How crazy is that? It's just, I was flabbergasted when I saw that they were bag lined. So yeah, just wow. And this one chima that I looked at from the 16th century was finished in such a crazy sophisticated way. It was bag lined, and it had a facing on the bottom, so that the lining wouldn't wear out or the shell wouldn't wear out. The facing would take all of the brunt of the skirts being dragged on the ground. Really just, I was, yeah, shocking. Really surprising stuff. Does this mean I need to make silk points now? So silk points would have been silk points would have been the lacing of choice for people in the upper crust. On the lower end of the spectrum, hemp, linen, we even have some cotton ones that have actually survived in the Langberg finds, and wool would have been used. So, it depends on your station, right? Not your average peasant. A peasant working in the field is not going to have a silk lace. She's going to probably have a hemp lace or a linen lace or a wool lace, probably not cotton. Cotton would have been expensive. Okay, so yeah, but if you are doing a nobleman or a wealthy merchant impression from the Middle Ages, yeah, you should have silk laces. And silk is really, really sturdy. It will last a long time before it finally frays and breaks. What is point armor? It's not point, it's to point the armor. So armor is, could be made out of a variety of materials depending on the period of the Middle Ages. By the 14th century, men at arms, especially knights, were wearing a combination of mail and plate armor. And they would point the mail and plate armor to their arming garments. To point something to your arming garments means to use laces to lace it onto your arming garment. So an arming garment would be a doublet, as we would call it generally. They weren't necessarily called doublets always in the 14th century, even in the 15th century. They were sometimes called coats. They were sometimes called pourpoints, depending on when and where you are exactly in France or England. And the garment would then support the weight of the armor, and then that would be distributed evenly across your body instead of all hanging from one specific spot. So your armor became an extension of your body, which is why medieval men at arms could do crazy things in their armor. They could do somersaults. They could jump onto the back of a horse. They could climb a ladder in their armor. They could do flips. They could do all kinds of things. They could dance in their armor, in fact. And that's because their armor was pointed to their garments. So it was actually basically one with their person. Yeah, this idea of clanky, uncomfortable armor slowing knights down, no, A slowed down knight is a dead knight. That's just not how it was. And most armor that you see in museums now is jousting armor, and it's 16th century jousting armor because that's what has survived. So it's sports armor, and it's not meant for battle at all. It is not intended to be worn on the field of battle. So it can be extra clanky and extra heavy, and it has to be, because by the 16th century, jousting is a sport. And it's literally like two cars driving at each other and crashing. That's the kind of force that is exerted on a man's body when you do full contact jousting with actual medieval lances, not with modern. Modern jousters do not use medieval lances. They do not. If they did, they would be damaging each other. Modern people who do medieval jousting now, they use balsa wood lances that shatter very easily at the tip. Medieval lances for sport jousting did not do that. So it was basically like two cars driving at each other at like 30 miles per hour, I think was someone actually recently ran the science on this and actually tested the force that was exerted. So you needed armor that would displace that force instead of transmitting it to your body. And that's why 16th century jousting armor is crazy heavy, crazy bulky, but they were literally just sitting on the horse and holding a lance and running at each other in it. They weren't doing anything else in that sports armor. Yeah, most armor that you see in museums is not medieval. It's post-medieval, it's Renaissance. It's 16th century or later even. Because medieval armor was used in battle, and it was generally used until it wore out. So it doesn't really, not much of it survives. There are some pieces, but it's just not much of it survives. And then when they do find it, generally, often the museum curators put it together incorrectly. That happened at the Met several decades ago with their Black Prince rig. It was actually put together backwards. So unfortunately, because I'm finger loop braiding, I can't, for some reason, my chat is not feeding itself. So I can't actually see what any of you said. So after I finish this length of lace, finish it off, I will take a moment to take any questions that you have that I may have missed, because the chat is just doing whatever the chat wants to do. Technology, I love technology so much. Right, are any of you working on anything? Or am I the only one? Am I the only one actually doing the crafting, medieval crafting thing? Oh, darn it. I had a whole little booklet full of medieval sayings that we were going to talk about today, little notes that I made about things I want to talk about, but some of them I can remember. So at the beginning of this stream, in the distances of time, I mentioned that I wanted to discuss the origin of medieval origins of certain common expressions, certain common idiomatic expressions in modern English. And because many of these actually do have their origins in the Middle Ages or even in ancient Rome, which is more fascinating to me, even though the specific vocabulary may have updated to a more modern parlance. One of those expressions is actually the apple of my eye, or the apple of one's eye. Apparently, Edward the Great of England is actually quoted, is actually documented as saying this. So it actually dates back to Old English. And that is because in Old English, ebel is the pupil of your eye. That was the word for pupil, was ebel. So the ebel of your eye, the apple of your eye, was the most important part of your eye, because without the pupil, you can't see. It was acknowledged. And that is why even in Alfred the Great's time, the expression, the apple of one's eye, had the meaning of something that was essentially precious to a person. Right. I thought that was that it actually dates back that far, and that there's actually documentation of Edward the Great having said this in one of the chronicles. I love finding these connections that connect the past to the present. It really, I don't know why, it's very important to me to feel connected to the past. Okay. Let me see. Working on a medieval style tapestry to take to reenactment as a blanket, double bed sized. Nice. Are you to take as a blanket? Pin Harris, are you actually weaving the tapestry? That's pretty cool if you are. Or are you doing like a painted wall hanging kind of thing? I should be working on that doublet. They will find the Labubu layer and think there was a Labubu cult. Yeah, that's probably true. So you don't need to, oh wait, I can, hold on a minute. In a few hundred years, they'll mix up modern sports equipment and actual weaponry too. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Okay, Mary says, Mary's Art on Wheels says, oh, I have a book about that from German medieval sayings. Yeah, you know, these historical sayings are really interesting. You know, connecting the past to the present. Okay, well, I now have 2 points, right? And again, this is, you can see how heavy duty that is, right? We're going to wax these. So I definitely recommend waxing them. And I thought about waxing it first and then weaving it or dipping it afterwards. But I suspect, I haven't tried this, and maybe I will try this, and then you can all watch me fail dramatically. I have a feeling if I waxed the hemp yarn first, it would stick to itself and it would make the weaving actually harder if I used beeswax. So what we're going to do is, after we get all these done, we're going to melt beeswax in a double boiler. And we're going to dip them in and, you know, pull them out, and then they'll be nicely reinforced by the beeswax. And that will also, you know, make them water resistant, even waterproof in some cases, and will definitely increase their longevity. And we know they did this because we actually have some of these points that have survived that have traces of beeswax still on them. So we know that that was a practice. My cat is angrily asking me to pet him. Yeah, my cat does that too. Pinhera says, tapestry in cross-stitch form. Very cool. I think it may only be used as a term for this in British English. That's very cool. I have seen a bunch of tapestries, cross-stitch tapestries out there actually for sale. And also the patterns. Did you do the cartoon yourself? Like, did you draw the cartoon onto the thing and then paint it yourself? And then are you doing the cross stitch over that? Or did you buy one of those pre-made kits? No judgment, by the way. So most people don't realize that a medieval tapestry like this one, this is a real tapestry, by the way. It's not a fake backdrop, right? I can lift it and watch it not go down again because there's a seat in front of it. But anyway, I made a mess with my backdrop. Tapestries like this one behind me, La Dame à la Licorne, which dates to the 1480s or 1490s. Okay. A tapestry like this was required multiple sets of skills. The cartoon, the design, that was not done by the tapestry maker at all. The cartoons were commissioned from artists, and the artist would first come up with a sketch to get it approved, and then the artist would come and transfer the cartoon onto the ground before there's a ground on which the tapestry is woven, right? It's a weaving technique. Tapestry is a weaving technique. And so you'd actually have a ground fabric, and the artist would come and draw the cartoon onto the ground, and then they would paint it in watercolor so that the color, they literally made a pattern for the tapestry weavers. And then all the tapestry weavers had to do was go over the pattern with their dyed yarns. So that is the medieval tapestry making process. Multiple professions were involved in producing any one tapestry. Let me see. Was there already colored wax? I don't recall seeing any evidence of colored wax in this era, which is not, I can't prove a negative. All I can say is I haven't personally seen evidence of medieval beeswax having been colored. And have any of you found any evidence of colored beeswax? I have not seen any evidence of colored wax candles, for instance. I haven't seen evidence of it. So I'd be interested if anyone else has. Let me see. Are you able to weave a bed sheet? How long would that take? I understand the rudiments of weaving, but I couldn't weave one myself. And a bed sheet woven on a hand loom would take quite a while. Because bed sheets are super wide. You would need a special loom. You would need a special loom to weave a bed sheet. Yeah, because it needs to be wider than what most hand looms will actually produce. So it would take I don't know, 50 hours to weave a bed sheet, maybe from start to finish. right? From setting, because you have to set up the loom. You have to set up the loom. But medieval bed sheets weren't usually woven to size. Usually they were made from lengths of linen. They were, the linen was woven and then a bed sheet was made out of it. But, I don't know. I haven't done hand weaving myself, so I haven't hand woven fabric myself. But I mean, just setting up a hand woven loom is quite a process. So, it's going to be dozens of hours are going to go into making a length of cloth. Hundreds of hours will go into making a length of cloth. The amount that you would then use for a sheet, I don't know, but it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of hours to do that. I mean, the weaving itself, once you get going on a plain tabby weave, like a sheet would be, the weaving itself will go pretty quickly, but there's a lot of the manual setup involved on a hand loom. It's really intense because you have to spool the fabric and, spool the thread and then set up your warp. It's a lot. Just getting my small looms going takes hours. Yeah, exactly. I mean, hours and hundreds of hours. I would say, I don't know. I don't want to give you an estimate because, 9 yards of medieval linen would probably just the weaving part of it, not the processing from flax to weavable thread or weavable yarn, just the weaving part for 9 yards of fabric. If you include the loom setup, that would probably take 30 hours. Maybe. If any of you have actually woven like a 9 yards of linen on a hand loom, let me know how long you think it would take. Yep, absolutely. As Ursula says, to weave something wide, it's also possible with a 4 or more harness loom by double weaving. One side is a fold, the other is both selvages. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, just the setup alone is crazy. I'm curious about your beautiful necklace. Is this a facsimile? Yes, this is a replica made by Armor and Castings of a pendant that belonged to Beatrice d'Este. And you can buy this on their website, armorandcastings.com, armor with a U. And if you enter the code Contessa10, you will get an extra 10% off. And they'll also know that it's a good thing to sponsor my channel. Total honesty, Armor and Castings are one of my channel sponsors, but I believe in their products because they produce excellent top-notch replicas. They're Ukrainian. They're now based out of the US for reasons that might be obvious to some people. And they're constantly reworking their replicas. So they're constantly looking at the molds that they've already made and reworking them for better detail and to upgrade the total replica and make it even more of a high quality product. So yeah, armorandcastings.com. This belonged to Beatrice d'Este. It's depicted on several different of her portraits, actually from the 1490s. And she was a member of the Este family from Ferrara. Her mother was actually Spanish from Naples, was Aragonese, and she became the Duchess of Milan. Right, she and her sister Isabella, the Este sisters, two of the leading luminary ladies of the Renaissance of the late 15th, early 16th century. Yeah, quite nice. And this can be worn. I actually I have a fun short video on YouTube if you're interested in checking that out. And it might still be available. I think I also have it on Facebook, but it's harder to look for stuff on Facebook. On my YouTube channel, there's a short that shows different ways that you can wear this lovely little nautch, as it would have been called in 15th century English. There's lots of different ways, pinning it onto hats, pinning it into your hair, all kinds of fun things for men and women. This is a unisex item, by the way. Men in the 15th century wore these. Women in the 15th century wore these. They are not gendered. So yeah, men are peacocks, women are peacocks. We're all peacocks. Let me see what else I missed. How did I source my background tapestry? So this tapestry, La Dame à la Licorne, I purchased most of these on eBay and some of them on Etsy. These are vintage. They're from 60 years ago or longer ago. And many of them were purchased, I think, by people who traveled to France and Flanders. We call it Belgium now. And they went to a tapestry weaving factory and then bought these as a souvenir. This one is actually woven out of wool and linen and silk. and it's fully backed in, this one is backed in cotton, but other ones I have are backed in hemp or linen. These were made by this one is a trying to remember. There's a couple of production companies. The Atelier. Oh, which one is this? There's a couple of companies that make these reproductions, and you want the vintage ones because the vintage ones are made with natural fibers. The new ones are made with polyester and nylon. So that's why I went and looked for vintage or dead stock tapestries. And you can actually get really good deals on these if you keep your eye on them. This one, it's huge. I think this one, it's 7 feet tall. It's actually really tall, 7 feet tall by 4.5 feet wide, because it's a replica of the original in the original size. I think we paid $600 for it. But if you were to buy this new in this size, you'd pay several $1,000s for it. So you can, and I bought some that were way bigger than this, replicas of the originals, and I only paid $200 for them because the people who were selling them didn't know what they have. So if you go on eBay and you do medieval tapestry, click on used, not new, in the filters, and you specify unicorn, for instance, then you will get tapestries like this. But there are other medieval replica tapestries from the 15th century that don't have unicorns in them that are similar replicas. So I have a video on my YouTube channel on another of the giant tapestries. I have one from the Hunt of the Unicorn, the series that is actually held in the cloisters in the Met in New York, in Yonkers. So I have a whole video on that, and it provides also shopping tips and things you need to look for and be aware of when you are purchasing or sourcing your own replica tapestries. Oh, let me see. Was the use of saltwater or freshwater pearls more common? I'm not certain which was more common. I think it depends on where you were. So I actually can't answer that question, but I will tell you that they had paste pearls in the Middle Ages. We have recipes from the 12th century, at least, step-by-step instructions on how to make your own fake pearls using paste and fish scales and or mica. How cool is that? They had paste stones in the Middle Ages, and we know how to we know how they made them, and you could actually make them yourself following the instructions in these medieval manuals on arts. One is Theophilus from the 12th century, and then there's one by Cennino Cennini in the 15th century. So I can't tell you whether fresh or saltwater pearls were more common. I suspect it depends on where you were. Especially if you have a source, if you're near the sources for saltwater pearls, probably they're more common. If you're near the place where freshwater pearls are more common, probably more common. But they definitely had fake stones and fake pearls. No, I don't need another hobby. Oh, Thomas, you're back. Thomas, I've missed you so much. Oh, where have you been, my dear? Goodness gracious. Oh, missed you so much. Where am I from? That's a complicated question. I don't need another hobby. Where am I from? I'm originally from the great state of Delaware in the United States. I was born and raised there. I studied there, but in my early 20s, I started studying abroad as part of my university education as a translator and linguist. And then I graduated after studying in a couple of different places at different European universities, and I immigrated to Germany, where I lived and worked as a translator for many years. I'm currently in South Korea. I have spent, out of the last 12 years, I have probably spent 9 of them here, more or less, kind of in and out sometimes. But yeah, so where I'm from is a tricky question. It depends on what you mean by where I'm from. Where I'm currently am, though, is Daegu, South Korea. Not that you would ever guess by the lady in the unicorn behind me. Do I like antiques? Oh, my dear Husafel. I grew up, my grandmother actually owned an antique store. And so I grew up, I spent a lot of time in her home, and it was nothing but beautiful, beautiful old wood furniture, antique Persian rugs, lovely sculptures and paintings everywhere. So yeah, I love antiques. I mean, I do medieval reenactment, and I'm confident that's part of the reason I do medieval reenactment. My tiny apartment has too many UFOs already. Yep. Unfinished objects. 100% Rosemary. 100%. Hobbies don't ask whether they're needed, they just show up. Yeah. Hobbies, I think the same distribution system that distributes kitties, the universal kitty distribution system, is the same system that distributes hobbies, right? And sometimes they arrive at about the same time. New cat, new hobby. Good morning, Lalit. Thank you for joining us today. It's lovely to see you again. Yeah. Well, thank you, Husafel. Appreciate that lovely compliment. A lady can never hear too many nice things about herself. What am I drinking there? Okay. I'm drinking something that is medieval Korean, but not medieval European. I am drinking green tea. From a replica Korea era teacup or wine cup, actually. They drank wine out of these as well. Right? Isn't that beautiful? Get those elegant cranes, the elegant sweep of the cup. Now, I love my lavender tea. And I don't know if my condottiero has tagged. Harney & Sons has a really high quality, super high quality loose leaf tea. I also get a lot of my bulk loose leaf teas from Frontier Co-op. That's where I got this particular lavender tea from. Did I like the movie Braveheart? I liked the movie Braveheart when I was 15 and didn't know any better about the history. Unfortunately, now I'm educated on the subject of both the actual history and the fashion history and the material culture. Braveheart is a fantasy movie, basically, that is masquerading as a historical movie. The clothing is terrible. There were no kilts in Scotland in the Middle Ages, not even great kilts, as far as we can tell. There was no paint. They did not wear blue paint in Scotland in the Middle Ages. We don't even know if they actually wore paint in ancient times. It could be tattoos that are actually being referenced in those Roman sources that talk about the painted people. So yeah, Princess Isabella, she's not that old when William Wallace is alive. She's a child. She is not a mature woman going and having sex with him in a dungeon to make sure that, Edward, or let me see, her son was Edward III, right? To make sure that Edward III is actually the son of a Scots. Now, I can't stand Braveheart anymore. Now that I know everything that I know, I can't watch it. I just get so distracted by everything being not true. So many things wrong with that. Let me see. What is a piece of furniture that is far too rarely mentioned? That's a very good question. A piece of furniture that's far too rarely mentioned. I guess it depends on what you mean by furniture. I guess a chamber pot is actually an appliance. But that is not mentioned enough. That is a piece of furniture by the 15th century at the latest. And I say at the latest because I haven't really looked further back on this particular piece of furniture. In Western Europe, people had developed a chamber pot stool. This is literally a chair, a pretty nice chair actually, that sits on top of a chamber pot so that you can sit comfortably and utilize the chamber pot without having to cop a squat precariously over top of the chamber pot to do your business in the comfort of your own chamber, right? So I feel like the chamber pot chair needs to be the stool. The stool, as they're sometimes called in the original, in the 15th century. The stool, the chamber stool, the chamber pot stool needs to be mentioned more often. I feel like it doesn't get the love it deserves. Because while squatting to do one's business is in fact actually better for your body ergonomically, much better for everything actually, because it's how we evolved. Wearing medieval garments or pre-modern garments or any kind of clothing and copping a squat is just not very convenient. It really isn't, especially for ladies. A woman probably invented the chamber stool. Yeah. Yeah, these stools still exist for disabled people. Yeah, they do actually. That's a good point. But the medieval ones are really elegant. Like they're made out of this beautiful wooden joinery. They look like thrones. They look like low-backed thrones. They're really nice. Groom of the stool, exactly, Rosemary. The most desirable, undesirable position in the king's court, in the king's household. What goes on this channel? Welcome to my Medieval Living History channel. I am the Contessa of the Creative Contessa, and today we have been doing medieval crafting. I'm just taking a brief tea break and answering questions about medieval material culture and medieval living history. I do a variety of things on this channel. I do getting dressed demonstrations in historical clothing. I demonstrate a wide array of medieval and historical handcrafts. I talk about fun historical topics pertaining to material culture, share fun tidbits and facts, and also all done with a special sort of acerbic wit that is unique to my brand. So this channel is a place for people who want to learn things, interesting things, in a less formal format than, say, a podcast or a university lecture. So lots of things go on this channel. Thank you, Bran. Appreciate that compliment. Don't forget to like and subscribe, everyone. Golden algorithm pull. Oh, cookies. Welcome. Did the algorithm actually bring you here and you're actually enjoying being here? My God, what a rare find is that? Question, what do you spend your time at reenactment doing when the public is around? Does your station as a noble mean you don't carry water? So if I'm actually at a public demonstration, right, then I have my ladies, my damsels with me. No, I don't carry the water. If I am actually depicting the Contessa or Madame la Comtesse with her retinue, I do not carry water. Now that doesn't mean I won't serve water to guests. That is something that a 15th century noblewoman would have absolutely done. She would have served water to guests of a higher, especially of an equal or higher station. But would I carry buckets of water around? No. That's why I have damsels and a staff. When it depends on the event, when it depends on the purpose of the demonstration, right? If it's, I'm often brought to public demos at living history events to actually teach dance. That's one of my fortes, is teaching, researching, recreating, and teaching medieval and Renaissance dance. So I'm often at them teaching dance. That's what you will most likely see me doing at any given event. Interestingly, it is unlikely that a lady would have actually taught dance in a public forum like that. Most dance masters that we can tell when we start studying the history of dance masters in the 15th century, that's the earliest recorded dance masters of which we know, they're all men. There are some references to schools of dance that are led by women for women, but I haven't found any primary source documentation of that. I will also often be actually working on handcrafts that would have been appropriate for a lady of my station, such as finger loop braiding or embroidery. I will also sometimes, if I'm demonstrating what a comtesse does, I'll also do readings from books, because that is something that noblewomen did together with their damsels and their companions. They would sit and someone would actually read aloud from the book. And sometimes it was, in fact, the lady of the house who was doing the reading. I also love to conduct 15th century salons. So the idea is that basically I gather a group of interesting people around me and we discuss different philosophical topics in depth. And I try to do that from the perspective of a 15th century lady. So those are the kinds of things I demonstrate when I'm being the comtesse. But if I'm just being a random 15th century middle-class person, then you might see me cooking over the fire. You might see me doing laundry. You might see me doing some kind of medieval alchemical experimentation. Depends on what it is I'm supposed to be depicting at that event. But most of the events I do are private. I don't do very many public events anymore, not because I don't want to, it's just I'm not in a place to do that very often these days. So most of the events I attend these days are private events. So I'm not usually doing a public demonstration anymore, but I can be hired to come to your event and do a public demonstration if you like. Yeah. Yeah, I do lots of cooking, lots and lots of cooking. Let me see. Was there a question I mentioned about bathing? How often did the average person in the 15th century or 15th century bathe? Great question, and a common one. Yeah. Bathing depends on what you mean by bathing. Do you mean submersing their body in a tub? If they lived in a city with a bathhouse, then it was about once a week, because they could go to the public bathhouse, and the bathhouse had tubs or even pools of water, and they would actually submerge their bodies and bathe themselves that way. If you just mean cleaning themselves every day, people clean themselves every day, according to all of the sources I read. And I've been doing a lot of research into this recently. People bathe themselves every day in some way, or wash themselves, clean themselves in some way every day. The health manuals from the era from up until the 15th century, 16th century, things start changing. But up until the 15th century, the health manuals are all of one voice on this matter. They lay out that you are supposed to clean very often. You should wash your hands before, during, and after a meal. You should wash your hands before doing anything. There's even one manual for surgery that tells the surgeons to wash their hands before they do any procedure and also after they do any procedure. There are manuals that talk about the daily routine of hygiene. In the morning, you should wake up, and multiple manuals from the 12th century to the 15th century all say the same thing. You should wake up in the morning, you should wash your face and hands, you should brush your teeth, you should wash any part of your body that needs attention, is how it's usually phrased. And you should they also talk about getting up and stretching, doing slow stretches, warming up the body to actually be in good physical condition. So it's not just that, cleanliness, that hygiene is important, but also that health, that being in good physical fitness is important. And the things they prescribe are basically exactly the same routines many of us follow to this day. Also, they suggest that you should wash before you go to bed, that you should wash your face and your hands and any necessary parts of your body before you go to bed. So medieval people cleaned all the time. Bathtubs, though, private bathtubs, that was a luxury, because a bathtub, they were giant barrels, basically, with the top cut off, like really big. And it would take so much water to fill that. And the expense of heating water was massive, because, you don't just get hot water. You have to burn fuel to generate the heat, to then heat the water. And then you need servants to carry the water from the kitchen where it's been heated to wherever your tub is, which may be up or downstairs. So a private bathtub was absolutely a luxury item, but you didn't need a private bathtub to clean. You just needed a basin, a cloth, and some water. And lots of people had soap. Soap was very prevalent by the 14th and the 15th century. It's all calibers, all grades of soap, everything from soap you wouldn't want to expose your hands to fine refined Castile soap made with super saturated with olive oil so that it was moisturizing. Right. So yeah, medieval hygiene is definitely a thing. Hair, it was recommended that you should wash your hair every 3 weeks, which, if you consider that they're covering their hair, so it's helping it keep clean. 2, they're combing it every day with combs that look like this. You can see me demonstrating that at the beginning of this live stream if you want to go back and watch the recording from the beginning, right? And combs like this, you can even see all of the detritus that a comb like this removes from your hair. So they're also not stripping their hair on a regular basis with surfactants that we do now with modern shampoos. So medieval scalps were just not producing the kind of hair oil that modern scalps are, that scalps that utilize surfactant shampoos, right? Your scalp starts producing more oil. You strip your scalp of oil, your skin goes, oh God, we need more oil to stay moist. So we're actually creating this horrible cycle in the modern world of shampooing our hair more and more frequently because we're shampooing it more and more frequently. But medieval people didn't suffer from that, because the hair washes that they had, they weren't thick and gelatinous like the modern ones are. They were hair washes, and they were lye-based hair washes. So the idea is you would actually pour this hair wash, this lye, this basic solution basically over your hair, and you would use this comb to comb it through, and that would help loosen any excess grease or dust or dirt and get it out. So that was recommended that you should wash your hair every 3 weeks, and I'm confident that that would be enough in the medieval world with the kinds of practices they had on keeping their hair covered in general. Great question. Pin Harris, thank you for joining us. I hope to see you the next time. And as Rosemary says, this comb not only removes excess grease, it moves the oil from your scalp, the natural oils, down the hair, all the way down the length of the shaft. It removes excess, but it also redistributes it. So it's a really great hair cleaning system. Let me see. Mary says, I can go about 2 to 3 weeks. Darn it, where'd you go? Without washing hair, but after that, my scalp rebels. Yeah, I can go about 2 to 3 weeks. It depends on, okay, many of you know I'm currently in South Korea. I'm in Daegu, and there's a lot of air pollution here. So it really depends on how covered my hair is and how bad the pollution is. I can tell. My hair tells me. It's not my scalp, it's my hair. My hair lets me know that it's time to get the pollutants out of it. So the modern world has a different set of evils than the medieval world had, right? Yeah. Menstrual cycle, what would the women use in medieval times? I actually just published a whole series of short videos on this topic on both Facebook and YouTube and TikTok, if you're watching from TikTok. So yeah, you can see that in more detail. There's a lot of debate about what women did in the Middle Ages, actually, for their menstrual cycle. So this is a fun topic. We almost lost my replica Cordial teacup. This is a really fun topic because it does, for those of you who are inveterate reenactors, you will know that the topic of medieval women and underpants and menstrual cycle is a polemic. There's a lot of people who say women didn't wear underpants, and there are some people who really do insist that they just freely bled into their linen smocks, that's why they wore a smock, to catch the blood whenever they menstruated. I've also heard people say, this is bullshit, women didn't menstruate, they were always pregnant, so no women were really menstruating, their menstrual cycles were shorter, they didn't really bleed that much. That's also bullshit. Because medieval women were not all pregnant all the time. Not all medieval women were married. Not all medieval women were having children, right? Many women in the Middle Ages were members of religious communities. They were not getting pregnant, not that often anyway. And they had methods, even if they were sexually active, they had methods of not getting pregnant. Trust me. And they were effective. So, there are lots of women in the Middle Ages who were still getting their periods despite being adult women. So it was absolutely a concern for medieval women. No free bleeding. No free bleeding. I actually have someone who kindly volunteered their own experience with accidentally getting menstrual. And I'm sorry if this might be TMI, but here it is. Just hang with me, guys. I know some of you men are going, oh my God, what is she saying? But you know what? Here it is. Here's the reality. This lady very kindly shared her very bad experience where she accidentally got some blood on her thighs in the night. And when she woke up, her legs were glued together. And she did herself some real damage by just pulling her thighs apart because of the blood, which should tell you that no woman is going to want to do that for any repeat experience. That's nonsense. No women are just going to, no. So what are the options then? We have actual archaeological evidence, real archaeological evidence of moss having been used as a menstrual pad. And I've covered this in one of the short videos. In Greenland, there was a Norse settlement in the 10th century, and it lasted until the 15th century. So people living in Greenland, interacting with the Inuit peoples who were there, but still maintaining their European lifestyle for the most part. And they actually excavated a cemetery in the Greenland colony back in the 1920s, I think they excavated it, because global warming means that the graves were actually eroding away. The permafrost had melted, the graves were eroding away, and the skeletons were actually just coming out of the earth, basically. So they went in. I know some of you are going to say, oh, you shouldn't disturb people's graves. Well, the graves were being disturbed by nature. So they did the right thing. They excavated them. And what they found is, well, if they didn't have to do much excavation, they researched them because they kind of excavated themselves, I guess. And what they found on one of the skeletons of a woman who died in her 20s, she had a string tied around her waist. The string connected between her legs from the front to the back, and there was a piece of moss tied to it. Brilliant. Perfect. And what we now know about moss is that we know, they might not have known, they didn't know what microbes were at all, actually. What we know about moss now, moss is antimicrobial, it's very absorbent, and you can actually rinse it and reuse it, and it's durable. So moss, at least in places where moss was endemic in Europe, which is not all of Europe, by the way, moss seems to have been a very good candidate for a natural menstrual pad. There is some evidence of rags having been used, linen rags having been used as basically rolled up and used as menstrual pads, also tied to a string and string system in the same way. But for my money, I would prefer the moss. The moss would be the better choice in my world. But the reality is that Europe is not a monolith. The 1,000 years of the Middle Ages is not a monolith. So what women did in different places in different times will perforce probably vary, especially as things like fabric become less expensive with the improvement in weaving and spinning technologies. That makes fabric less of a precious resource and something you might use for a throwaway application like a menstrual cycle. But of course, the thing about menstrual rags, hear me out, everyone, you can launder them and reuse them. I know we live in a disposable society now where if anything is even a little dirty, we just throw it away rather than trying to get the stain out or reusing it, even if it has a stain. But medieval people would have just washed their menstrual rags and kept using them until they weren't really reusable anymore. And in fact, I suspect that menstrual rags probably started their life out as a linen undergarment like this. And then when the linen undergarment wore away to the point where patches couldn't even be made anymore, you see I'm patching this one as we speak. When the garment wore away so that the patches wouldn't hold anymore and couldn't hold it together anymore, they would cut this up into rags, and those could very well then become menstrual rags. They could be rags for washing things, or rags for stuffing the walls for insulation, or rags for menstruation. So that's a really good question. Yeah, there's debate because it's a subject that doesn't seem to be written about in any sources that I've read, and sources that should talk about it, like gynecology manuals, which we have from the Middle Ages, don't talk about it. So it's almost like something that was just so commonly known and handled that it was not considered essential to be included in a source, because there was not necessarily anything innovational about it, as my suspicion. Okay. Is this pre-recorded? It is not. Sorry, I get on I get on a roll and then I go and check the live stream. It is not pre-recorded. This is live. 100%. As a medieval woman, I would have just turned into a mermaid. That's fun. I love that idea. The Melusine, are you talking about the Melusine? The Melusine is actually a medieval legend about a siren. And the Melusine actually had two tails. We're back. We're back. I'm sorry about that, everyone. I'm sorry about the breaks in the live stream today. Technology, baby. Technology for the win. You know, we're living at the highest tech time, supposedly. Huh. Anyway, the story, look up the legend of the Melusine. It's kind of a heartbreaking story. It's also supposedly an origin story of the House of Luxembourg. So yeah. Cool's 2009. Thank you for that compliment. I am fascinated by the world, past and present, and I just love knowing things and learning things, and I love sharing my knowledge with people. So this is, if you like learning random things in a random format, in the least formal kind of lecture you can possibly imagine, then my channel is the channel for you. Medieval times education from a white lady in South Korea. Yep, 100%. It's the full, it's the meta of the meta, right? And I can also hold forth about Korean history. Don't get me started there. Yeah, if you're enjoying this, please double tap that screen or like however you can, and consider subscribing, guys. And also consider becoming a channel member, as some of you have today. Much appreciated. Channel membership, patronage on Patreon, and channel subscription on Facebook all come with extra posts and perks. Someone once asked me which one has the most perks. I think Patreon patrons have the most extra content. But yeah, access to extra content, extra resources, and if you become a channel member or a patron or a subscriber, you get access to my Creative Contessa Discord server, where I interact with all of you, with all of my supporters, and we share lots of really interesting information and extra resources. Yeah. And I also do occasional live like Zoom sessions with my financial supporters, where we actually interact face to face and talk and just kind of kvetch and have a good time. I'm always working on projects, of course, or drinking tea, as I am now. Yep. Let me see, comment. The knowledge of menstrual practices was probably something passed from mother to daughter. So several families may have done different things in the same area. Yep, 100%, just like now, right? Just like now. Just like now. Oh, hello from Ireland. Welcome. Thank you for joining us so late. Love it. Did most people wear shoes in the Middle Ages? Yes, 100%. Most people in the Middle Ages absolutely wore shoes. There are exceptions in Ireland. There are times when many people didn't. And I don't mean like by times, I mean like when they would go out into the bog, they frequently didn't wear into boggy areas. They frequently didn't wear shoes. They just went barefoot. But then when they were in a town or in a settlement, they would put their shoes back on. So, but otherwise, most people in medieval Europe wore shoes. Ireland seems to be one of these exceptions. And we have lots of extant shoes that have survived from the Middle Ages. My condottiere is not here. Otherwise, I would have him bring one of our several pairs of shoes. And not only did they wear shoes, their shoes were leather, and they were actually sewn inside out. It's very supple, bendable leather. They were sewn inside out and then turned right side out. So they're called turn shoes. But they did not have really thick soles like modern shoes do, which means they were actually better for your feet, and the leather would stretch to fit your foot so you wouldn't end up with bunions, quite like we do now. And that also meant, though, that they weren't good for rough surfaces. They wouldn't provide very much protection from a rough surface. And because they were just leather, then if you walked through mud, they would get wet and nasty. That's why they had something called, that was in English called a pattens. Pattens are an overshoe, a super sole, basically kind of like a sandal for your shoe, a shoe for your shoe, if you will. And they could be made out of wood or leather. Some of them were quite sophisticated with cork interiors, for instance, and beautifully tooled leather. And these pattens would also give you some elevation. So they would elevate you out of the muck. And they would protect your shoes from wear and tear, and they would help keep them dry. They would also provide an extra insulating layer for your foot, which is why we sometimes see people wearing them indoors. Not the wooden ones. The wooden ones are almost never worn indoors, but the nice leather ones worn by men and women, you see them being worn indoors, I'm pretty certain to insulate against a sort of cold floor. Because even if you have lovely tapestries insulating your room, the floor may or may not be insulated very well. So these leather pattens would provide an extra bit of insulation for the bottoms of your feet. Right? So yeah, they definitely had shoes, and the shoes changed in style across the centuries. There's not necessarily one style that remains in style for the entire Middle Ages. In fact, there isn't. But there are, the shoes aren't so innovative that they're changing every 10 years until you hit the 15th century. Then the rate of fashion change accelerates drastically. Let me see. I have a pair that needs a new sole. Yep. And they definitely resold medieval shoes, were resold and repaired all the time. In fact, there were, hear me out, wars between cobblers and shoesters, shoemakers, cordwainers, as they were called in English. A cordwainer was a shoemaker, called that because the best leather for shoes came from Cordovan leather, goat leather from Cordoba in Spain. So they're called cordwainers, Cordoba leather makers, right? Cordwainers were the shoemakers. Cobblers were not shoemakers. Cobblers were shoe repairmen, and their functions were carefully regulated by law in different places, especially London. And often cordwainers would get brought up on charges of making, of actually making new shoes rather than repairing old shoes. And eventually in London, it got to the point where they had to regulate the percentage of new leather that a shoe repaired by a cobbler could contain. Can you imagine that? They actually had to regulate. They had to say, okay, cobblers, if you have to use more, and I don't remember what the percentage was, it was a specific percentage, but I'll give you an example. If you have to use 70% new leather to fix that shoe, you are no longer fixing that shoe. You are clearly just making a new one. Right, so yeah, so basically these laws were implemented to stop these disputes between cordwainers and cobblers and keep their professions distinct and separate. Team cobbler versus team cordwainer, yep. And we have extant shoes that show serious repairs. Serious repairs. What's the word I'm looking for? Clobbering. Clobbering is where you actually put a patch on the bottom of the sole, for instance. We see shoes that are clobbered. We see shoes where an entire new sole was just attached to the bottom of the current shoe, right? And we actually do have some evidence of double-soled shoes, not just where a repaired sole was attached, glued on, basically, where it was intentionally made to have a double sole from the very outset. And that could be one way to deal with the very thin soles of turn shoes, relatively thin soles of turn shoes. That's better. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, medieval shoes, a very interesting topic. There's some fantastic books on medieval shoes. The Museum of London has an excellent book called Shoes and Patents that presents the original finds that they have from London of medieval shoes and patents, those shoes for shoes that I was mentioning. There is also an excellent book called Stepping Through Time. Really excellent. I'm pretty certain it's out of print, but you can get it through interlibrary loan. Really fascinating read. Lots of pictures of so many different extant shoes from across Europe, also extant patents. And what's really great about Stepping Through Time is that they provide a sketch for each kind of shoe, showing the construction method and the layers and how the seams were put together and the stitches, so that you can actually, if you want to recreate them authentically, Stepping Through Time is your baby. It really is. So yeah, the cordwainer versus cobbler thing is always so fascinating to me. And now of course most people use the word cobbler to mean a shoemaker, but that's not the correct use at all. I think woven straw mats are really lovely. They are. I agree. I have a couple of very nice woven straw mats that are traditional Korean style. Those are the kind of carpets, the thing they would put on the floor, so-called carpet, are these really beautiful bamboo mats, actually, really lovely. I have a couple of them, but I can't put them out right now because we're in a vacation apartment, a vacation rental basically, and we do have cats in our vacation rental, and I know that our cats would just use them as a scratching post. So until I move into a much bigger apartment in a more permanent sort of situation where I can have my separate rooms in different styles and different historical periods, where I can close the door and keep the cats out, I can't put the mats out. Nor can I put out my nice Persian rugs because, again, my cats would just use them as a scratching post. Oh my goodness. El Jodedor. What a naughty name. Naughty, naughty, naughty. Malito. Cats are jerks. They are. Cats are jerks, and yet we can't live without them. Yeah, we've had to, our cats are such little assholes. They don't sleep at night. They're super active at night, and so we have to literally fish them out of our bedroom before we go to bed and kick them out and shut the door extra hard because they've also figured out how to use the pull down handles on the doors because they're clever and they want to get in the room and they want to play with us in the middle of the night. So we weren't getting much sleep. So we now have started evicting them from the room. And then at about 7 a.m. when I wake up, when I decide I'm actually going to get up, I go and open the door and unleash the Krakens, and they come in for morning cuddles, because otherwise we wouldn't sleep ever. Reptiles, lovely to see you again. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of professions in the Middle Ages that, of course, no longer exist because we no longer have people doing those jobs. And we're about to see, I think, even more professions vanishing, and I don't think they're necessarily going to be replaced by new professions. Were vets a thing back in medieval times? That is a good question. So we actually do have a manual of veterinary science from the 15th century. So I am not, or veterinary medicine from the Middle Ages. So it's very clear that there were people who specialized in animal medicine, because of course these wealthy, these aristocrats, these kings, these queens, these princes and princesses, they loved their hawks. They loved their hawks and they loved their horses. So that means that there had to be specialists at the very least in caring for those groups of animals. Now, are we talking about dogs and cats? I haven't personally seen evidence of specialists in cat or dog medicine. That might be an interesting topic for further examination. But I've definitely seen treatises that talk about healthcare for hawks and horses, the two H's, right? Yeah, can't go hunting if you don't have hawks and horses, and if you can't go hunting, then you're clearly not an aristocrat. Yeah, cats remember Egypt too much. They do. They remember the glory days, right? Yep, that is a truth universally known. So let's see. Did I miss any? If I missed, I don't live with animals. My loss, I suppose. Dogs are cool. Cats are too. I just do my thing. Cats. So the universal cat distribution system keeps sending cats to me. I travel a lot for reenactment and just for travel to explore the world, which makes it really inconvenient to have any kind of animal companions that are not completely self-caring. And cats are very independent, but even still, they have to have food, and their litter box needs to be changed on a regular basis, along with water provided. So I never really wanted to have cats. And yet, starting in the year 2008, the universe persistently sends me cats. So, the first cat that I had as a newly fledged adult was a kitten that found me at the base of Burg Frankenstein outside of Darmstadt, Germany. We went there on the Tag der Deutschen Einheit, the German reunification day. So it was a holiday. We parked in the parking lot and we were getting ready to hike up to the top of the hill to go to the castle ruin. And yes, I mean the Burg Frankenstein, the one that inspired Mary Shelley. We exited the car, stepped out into the parking lot, which is in the middle of a forest, and lo, I hear emanating from the depths of the trees, mew, 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 this very distressed kitten meow. So we go into the forest, and by the way, this was not near any homes or anything. Out of the forest, 20 feet in, emerges this adorable little tabby kitten, not a young kitten, I would say probably 12 weeks, right? Maybe even 4 months old at that point. Still pretty small, but not small. She climbed straight into my lap. I knelt down to try to get her to come to me. It was not a problem. She climbed into my lap. We knew at that point that we had a cat. That was it. We had a cat. So, I don't know if she'd gotten dumped or abandoned. I don't know if she'd gotten lost. It was in the middle of the forest, so it's not like I could go look for, lost cat signs. And this was 2008, so it wasn't really easy to just put out information like, look, I found this cat, if this is your cat. So we had a cat. We named her Princess. And then in Korea in 2018, when we were living in Pyeongtae, I was walking around the 6th century, 9th century earthworks fortress park that was right next to our apartment complex. Basically, it was a loop. And one night, out of nowhere, this giant ginger cat comes out of the darkness, giant. And he starts following me around, just meowing at me all the time. Meow, 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 the whole time. This goes on for 2 weeks before I realize that the universe has sent me another cat. And then 2.5 years ago, a friend of mine here in Korea said that a litter of kittens had recently lost its mother to a car accident and they needed a home. And I just, these babies just look so cute. Well, there was one that needed a home and he had cute little fold ears. He was really sweet. I said, okay. So on the day I went to go and meet him and pick him up and take him home, actually the lovely lady who was fostering him said, oh, by the way, his brother has been returned. So his brother had been fostered to someone else. And unfortunately, this individual had no experience with feral kittens. And so when Chimi, I would find out, would hiss and spit at him, he just left him alone for 2 months. He left this cat alone, this kitten alone. I mean, he fed the kitten, he changed the kitten's litter, but he didn't interact with it. He didn't try to lure him in with treats or anything like that. So he didn't socialize him at all. Well, I wasn't going to break up two brothers. I mean, really. So the universe sent us Tommy and Chimi, our two cow kitties that many of you have seen on my Kitties of the Palace cat only channel. Right. Okay. So we had Tommy and Chimi and they were really sweet. About a year later, kitten season in Korea, we find one of the cats that lived at the base of our apartment building had a litter of 9 kittens. 9 kittens. It's a lot of kittens. And not all of them were thriving. 2 of them, 2 little tabbies that were clearly from a different father from the other cats, the other kittens in the litter. One of them we discovered dying. We took that poor little baby to the vet, and the vet did so much to try to save this poor little tyke, but she was too far gone, really too far gone. Her sister, on the other hand, who would become our kitten Nabi, was not too far gone. So we rescued Nabi, took her to the vet, got her cleaned up, got her injections, and she was a little malnourished because basically the mother cat had just stopped feeding them. She stopped caring for them at all. She'd focused on the 6 that were bigger and healthier, basically. So we ended up thus with another kitten, Navi. So yes, the universe keeps sending cats to us. The universe feline distribution system is healthy and operational. I'm dismayed to report. Wait, you have a cat channel? I do. Kitties of the Palace. We upload shorts and we do live streams when the kitties are cuddling and sleeping, and sometimes we live stream when they're playing. So yeah, check out, if you are into kitty content, check out Kitties of the Palace. I don't do anything fancy. It's really just natural kitties in their natural environment doing natural kitty things. So no clever editing, no, AI intervention. And we live stream them basically every day, sleeping and snuggling and grooming each other. No, I don't have 5 cats, sadly. Princess vanished in 2018. She was in our house in DuPont that we owned back then. And we were in Korea and we hadn't yet brought her over to join us in Korea. And our housemate unfortunately had a mental breakdown and we didn't know it. The person was actually watching our house and our cat for us. And Princess disappeared. Kind of heartbreaking, actually. I never know what happened to her. So we have 4 cats, unfortunately. Yeah. I sometimes think that Nabi, our little tabby, is actually Princess's reincarnation. Yeah, it was the worst thing. The worst thing, seriously, the worst thing that can happen is for a cat to just disappear. If she had just died with us, if we'd had to take her to the vet and had to put her to sleep, at least we would have known, but she just vanished. Yeah, it was very, very sad. I'm still sad about it. Yep. Yep, very sad. I live on an island in the upper Mississippi River. I've had baby ducks waddle up and peep at me. I just can't commit. Makes me cry good to say goodbye to baby ducks. I just need to care for me. Oh yeah, no, reptiles. No criticism. Not everyone has the spoons to take care of animals or to become an animal companion, right? It's no criticism, man. Yeah. Okay. Nice little tea bit. Yeah, they make their way into our hearts and leave indelible marks. They really do. And I'm not a dog person. I don't hate dogs, but I was mauled by a dog when I was 8. A very savage, vicious German Shepherd bit a hole into my arm down to the bone. You can still see the scar. It's a pretty nasty scar. Really hard to get in the camera. Yeah. I don't even know if it's showing because I can't see it because it's really awkward angle. Anyway, I'll take a picture of it and post it. Really nasty scar. So we were a cat family anyway, so that was kind of my first real interaction with a dog. And yeah, that kind of left a mark. So I'm not a big fan of big dogs. Yeah. The dog should have absolutely been put to sleep. And they lied. The people who owned the dog lied and said that I had been teasing the dog. I was not. I was terrified of the dog anyway. And I was standing with my back against the trailer where this dog was living. And my friends were teasing the dog. And out of nowhere, and I was the furthest from the dog, out of nowhere, the dog launched through the air and landed with his mouth open, with his jaw open, his gaping maw open on my arm. So I did the thing I didn't know what to do. I tore my arm out of his mouth. He didn't open his mouth. I tore it out, and he took a big chunk of my arm with him. So yeah, fun times. That's why I'm not much of a dog person. I've obviously gotten over my mostly have triumphed over the fear that I used to have. But if a large dog growls at me, my instinct is to kick it in the face. No, I don't do that. I said my instinct, like that's my self-preservation kicking in. I won't do that, but yeah, it was really sad. It wasn't the dog's fault, right? I mean, it was obviously bad owners. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I remember a Great Dane tried to attack our dog while Mom and I were on a neighborhood walk. I still don't trust large dogs. Yeah, small dogs or whatever, man. Koreans are all about the purse dogs. And God, I don't know how many strollers we see now that have dogs in them instead of humans. People seem to not understand that taking your dog for a walk means that the dog should walk with his legs. So yeah, those little floor mops, they don't bother me at all. And I mean, in general, a large dog doesn't bother me if it's behaving in a neutral to friendly manner. But I can feel, I'm empathic, so I can feel when a dog feels a certain way, and I will avoid them. Yeah, God forbid the dog start growling at me. I will kick the dog in the face. Sorry, if it's me or the dog, I win. Yeah. Okay, reptiles, thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like if you haven't. Yeah, everyone, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this. Normally, I don't talk about animal trauma. It's just sort of where the conversation took us at this point. Right now, I'm drinking tea from a cup that was fired in a rebuilt kiln from the Southern Song Dynasty, as unlikely as that sounds. Shuriken, if there's any place where that's to be likely, it's on my channel. That's super cool. Where's the rebuilt kiln? Because here where we are in Korea, we have a bunch of different rebuilt kilns from different periods. We've got rebuilt kilns from the Goguryeo era, from the Shilla era, from Goryeo, and from Joseon Dynasty, from various places. So BW, my friend, this is literally the channel. This is literally a live stream where I talk. So there's no one else to talk, buddy. Running from the dog in a dress. Yeah. Oh, it's in Jianyang. Shuriken, are you currently are you in China at the moment? That's pretty cool. Cool. Yeah, what? Yeah, exactly. It is not a sin for women to talk. You are misinterpreting Paul, I'm going to assume. Yeah, probably. Because I'm not in a church. So not talking doesn't apply because I'm not in a church. I'm in my home. Oh, VW, buddy. VW. No. Oh, you're in Atlanta. Okay, well, that's not close to China. Granted. That's literally the other side of the planet from China. Yeah, VW, you might wanna have a chat with the big guy and learn about judging and maybe listen to what Jesus actually said and not what the churches have misinterpreted him as saying. Yeah, you should read scripture yourself, buddy, like all of it, not just select parts. Anyway, I, on the other hand, have read scripture and studied the Bible. And yeah, I know that most modern Christian interpretations are definitely incorrect. Anyway, oh, I love your necklace. Thank you. This is a replica of a 1490s piece from Armor and Castings, by Armor and Castings. The original belonged to Beatrice d'Este. So 1490s Italian, but we know that jewelry making and goldsmithing was an internationally traded item. Oh yes, God, I forgot to tell you guys. Really exciting news on that score. Anyway, we know that jewelry that was made in one place was then exported to another because just like now, foreign luxury goods were very hot in the Middle Ages. So just because you lived in Italy doesn't mean that you wouldn't have items that were made in other parts of Europe. And we know that because of the inventories and expense accounts that we have that have survived from the Middle Ages that talk about purchasing items from different parts of Europe and bringing them to where the people actually live. Rosemary says she's been eyeing the Memento Mori rings from them. Yeah, their rings, especially their latest iteration of everything, is just so really wonderful. They've reworked, they've retooled so many of their molds, and so the details are just really divine. Honestly, Lalit, welcome back. Wait, I had a comment there. The blue dress looks amazing on you. Women should talk more. Thank you, Gary Hurst. This is a kirtle, by the way. It's spelled at least 20 different ways in 15th century English. So if you're wondering what kind of dress this is technically, it's a cotte simple in French, actually. So this is basically, I'm wearing underwear. You're seeing me in my 15th century Lululemon, basically. Let me see. What's the most surprising pet you've heard of from medieval times? A cheetah in England? Yeah. So depends on what you mean by pet, right? So what is a pet? What is the difference between a pet and an animal that you keep in your menagerie? You know, in the Tower of London, they actually had a menagerie in the Middle Ages of exotic animals, including but not limited to cheetahs, lions, giraffes. I'm trying to remember, there was another animal I recently read about that was in that menagerie that was quite surprising. Yeah. So what counts as a pet versus an animal that you keep in your menagerie? I'm not certain I can draw the line there. Medieval people, for the most part, the pets they kept were cats and dogs, as we understand pets for the most part. Hawks weren't really pets. They were like hunting companions. They were almost also viewed in some ways as tools, but also they got really emotionally wrapped up in their hawks. There's a great tale in the Decameron. I don't remember which novel or which day, but it's this tragic story about this hunting hawk that this man basically sacrifices in an attempt to impress his lady love. And he's so heartbroken by having to sacrifice this hunting hawk. Like, it really shows the depth of emotion that medieval people felt for animals, in this case, for a hawk. So yeah, most surprising anytime is when I find evidence of Saharan African animals or animals from what is now India in London. That always surprises me. Yeah. Yeah, peacocks don't surprise me. Peacocks were really common. Even though peacocks come from like Persia, basically. They're tropical birds from South Asia. You know, even though that they were very common in medieval Europe because they do well everywhere. Like you can go to London now, you can go to England now and you just find peacocks wandering around. They're really adaptable. They're basically jungle chickens. They're fancy jungle chickens. That's what a peacock is. It's a fancy jungle chicken. Let me see. Wait, in England. Yes, in England. Tea with Tash. I hope Tash, did it work out? How are you feeling now? You had your first day. Did it go as badly as you thought? Did it go better than you thought? I hoped it helped to at least, be distracted a little bit. This is my comfy houseware. The Shuriken says, can you tell me about your headgear? It looks so cool. I can, and I'll do you a solid Shuriken, and everyone else is probably, some other people probably also have the question. I'll show it being put on. Right, okay. So my hair is, well, it's kind of fallen out, but it's just in 2 braids and then tied into a bunch of knots. Right, so this is my kerchief. It has 2 pieces, a trapezoid on the back and a rectangle on the front, and it's connected in the back right there with just a couple of stitches. It is called a kerchief or a couvre-chef. It is not referred to as a coif as far as I can tell in medieval English or medieval French. A coif seems to have been something that only men wore. A kufi, on the other hand, is something that women wore also. So you put it on and then you take the trapezoid ends, just bring them forward, and then you just twist them like this until it secures the hood part of the trapezoid or the hood part of the kerchief against your head, like that. And then I prefer this look where we bring it up the sides like that, and then we tie it. We just kind of tuck those ends like that. And then if it's really bright outside, then I have this lovely frame that also reduces the glare very much so. Like this is almost as effective as sunglasses, and I'm not exaggerating. Or if it's not too bright, then you can set it back like that. So yeah, this was worn in Flanders, sort of Belgium and the Netherlands, France and England in the 15th and into the 16th century. This is not generally a Southern European look. This is more a Northern European look. And it's linen. Oh, my wife saw me watching you and muttered, wonder what kind of moisturizer she uses. I miss Korean products. So what do you use? I use a range of moisturizer, and you have to in Korea. It gets really dry here. I just started trying out some new organic Korean moisturizers, but I also use replica medieval and Renaissance moisturizers by Cosmetica Obscura. They've got this wonderful like mystical smell to them because they smell the way medieval products would have smelled, not modern ones. So they really smell quite lovely. I honestly don't remember the names of any of the Korean products that I just recently purchased because they're so new I haven't committed them to memory. I'll let you know in the next live stream. But I do use a lot of Cosmetica Obscura products. Check out their website if you would like to have replica medieval and Renaissance skincare and hair care products, and even medieval cosmetics that are made from extant medieval recipes. Yep. Let me see. Oh, I'm glad to hear everything went well, Tash. Excellent. Yep. My dad had peacocks when I was growing up. There's stories behind that. Yeah, there was a peacock that lived behind my kindergarten, my elementary school. And all I remember is that it sounded like a haunted house movie all the time. I like your style. Do you shave your armpits? I do not. I do not shave my armpits. No, I don't. I used to. I don't anymore. Why bother? Did they use it for sleeping? Japan is so humid. Oh, this. Did they use this for sleeping? They wore this during the day for certain. I have seen depictions of women wearing this when sleeping, and I have slept in them, but it doesn't stay on my head when I sleep. So I go to bed and it's on my head, and by the time I wake up, it's somewhere else on my pillow. I think even in my sleep, I'm active. Let me see. The name alone of the medieval stuff is enough to pique my interest. Yeah, Cosmetica Obscura. It's two sisters, twins actually. They're working out of New York State, and it's everything is handmade, small batch made, and they do all the research themselves and the recreation. I'm hoping to have them on the channel so they can do a live demo of ancient Roman cosmetics and medieval cosmetic application, how to actually get the full look. Yep. So yeah. Okay, everyone, are there any, we're coming up on, I think we're past the 3-hour mark at this point. I don't know, the stream kept quitting and starting again. Are there any final questions? Okay, do you know pet names from the Middle Ages? Yes, I have actually read about pet names from the Middle Ages. They tended to be characteristic. So, you know, if the animal had a characteristic, then the name would reflect that. I don't remember. I've just drawn a blank on all the names that I now knew from the Middle Ages. I'll try to go and pull that up and dive into that more in our next live stream. Yep. Is your significant other this down the rabbit hole of medieval life and history? Yes. Yes, he is. He is down this far the rabbit hole of medieval life and history. I tried early on in my life dating someone who was not in the lifestyle. It didn't work. It's too time intensive. We hardly ever saw each other. Oh, let me see. What about degeneracy? There must be alcoholism and drug use in those times. Did the aristocrats use party drugs? There were no party drugs. So you have to understand that a lot of the things that are now party drugs, they didn't exist in medieval Europe. Their spirits were not liquor spirits. That's not medieval. They weren't. They were distilled for alchemical purposes, but they weren't drunk. So this is before gin. This is before really hard-hitting alcohol was available to really get that drunk. You would have to drink a lot of small beer or small ale to get intoxicated. And wine was almost always consumed highly diluted. So, and by highly, at least 2 to 1, temperate people would drink it 3 to 1 or 4 to 1. So, they just, drink. The most degenerate people got was drunk. There were no party drugs, not in Europe anyway. Poppy juice was not taken recreationally because it was acknowledged that if you drank poppy juice, you might not wake up again. They weren't able to produce it in such a regulated way that they could actually use it recreationally safely. And no one was smoking anything in Western Europe. It just wasn't done. So no, there just weren't. The degeneracy, medieval degeneracy basically limits itself to gluttony, so eating a lot of food and a lot of rich and expensive foods, and to drinking too much, but just drinking wine and beer and ale too much, cider in places where apples are prominent, like Brittany, for instance, or Normandy. So no, it's just degeneracy was much simpler. It was a simpler time. There was less variety in degeneracy. Dancing also could be viewed as degenerate, actually. In the city of Ulm, the Imperial Free City of Ulm, in 1406, they passed a law, or 1403 or 1406, they passed a law that forbade couples dancing because it was too scandalous. It was simply too stimulating, way too improper. And by couples dancing, I don't mean the embrace like you see in the modern ballroom dancing. No, that's not a medieval thing. I mean just 2 people dancing side by side, holding hands. This hand, one hand. That was considered scandalous and degenerate in early 15th century Ulm. And if you were caught couples dancing in a couples dance rather than a line dance in 15th century Ulm, you would have to pay a fine of 7 shillings, which I think was a sizable sum of money. So that was degenerate. Yeah, there were no party drugs. Oh, let me see. What's the point of even going out on the town on a Friday night then? To have fun with your brain in its normal state of mind, I guess. Yeah. Let me see. I think you're just saying, it's not translating, but I think you're asking, are we role playing? No. Or do I do role playing? Not really. I do immersive medieval living history. Yeah. It's a simpler degeneracy. Oh, did you see that I fell asleep on watching you and dreamt that you were in a trial? Maybe alive about medieval trials, laws, and justice? I did see that. And we actually have been covering that in our medieval story time when we have been reading the pardon letters. So we'll probably do some more pardon letters in our next medieval story time. Yeah, for certain. It's an interesting topic. Justice and punishment, crime and punishment in the Middle Ages, always an interesting topic. For sure, mushrooms were used in the Middle Ages. Reptiles, I haven't seen evidence of that. I'd be interested if you have actual evidence of that, at least recreational use of them, and that those kinds were there. That hand holding is wild stuff. The weird thing is, if you're in a line, dancing in a line, you are holding hands too, but it's the issue with the scandalous nature of the couples dancing is that it's just you and one other person. Oof, too intimate, way too intimate. Eating a lot of saffron as a party drug. Saffron was way too, you would not, no. Saffron was often worth its weight in gold. So you would not eat a lot of saffron as a party drug. That is very unlikely. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Juan, gracias. I also love gossip. Yeah, gossip is tons of fun. Gossip is lots of fun. Yeah, no, I don't see anyone doing saffron as a party drug. The amount of saffron you would have to get consumed to eat an impact from it would be perilously, prohibitively expensive. Oh, Cool's 2009 notes that couples dancing would make single people jealous. I mean, yes, I hadn't viewed it from that perspective, how it might upseat the communal peace, right? What's the term for that? The social network, the social norms, right? It might engender some kind of violence inspired by jealousy. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Okay, everyone. Are there any final questions before we part ways for the day? Tomorrow, while you come up with your final questions, I will once more thank my patrons, my channel members, and my subscribers on Facebook. Thank you so much for your financial support. Thank you to all of you who left me super chats. I'm honored that you're willing to give me your hard-earned money to keep sharing everything I'm learning about medieval material culture and hopefully inspiring you to creativity and to other ways of understanding the world. I would like to just briefly announce my upcoming schedule of live streams. Tomorrow is our medieval cooking party, and I will be doing a 16th century Persian lamb roast that is just going to absolutely make your mouth water. And we'll be doing some side dishes to accompany it. So we will be traveling to the Safavid court at the end of the 16th century. So if you're interested in learning about Persian cuisine from a long time ago, then please join tomorrow's live stream. We'll be the same bat time, the same bat channel. 10 a.m. Seoul time, 9 p.m. New York City time, middle of the night, your Africa. And then on Monday morning, we have a Frox Flick chat with my buddy Mason King who may or may not still be watching. And we will be talking about Bridgerton because I know it's not medieval, but I know a fair bit about Regency fashions, and Bridgerton makes me grind my teeth. So if you want to see me holding forth vehemently, vociferously, and acidically and acerbically about the fashions and the various scenarios that they present in Bridgerton, then please join us on Sunday night, your middle of the night, your Africa, Monday morning in Asia. And then on Tuesday, we have medieval story time. We'll be coming back. OT with Tash. We're going to tear it apart, but we will also at our Frock Flicks live stream, we will also actually be we'll be discussing other if you have questions about medieval movies or historical TV series or historically based movies, then during our Frock Flicks chat, you are welcome to bring up your questions there. So it doesn't just have to be Bridget Boring, or Bridger Boring, as Tea with Tash very cleverly quipped. Yeah, so if you're interested in hearing about what Bridgerton is doing wrong, then yeah, join in. And I will also mention some things they've done right. There's like 3 fashion related things they've done right. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I once read a single source that saffron was eaten as a drug, but only once. Yeah, I mean, saffron was just so expensive. And no, I don't have any private vids. I have jokingly, so I have thought about doing a very cheeky OnlyFans page where it's medieval ankles and calves. Which means I'll always be wearing like baggy bias cut stockings because that's before knit stockings really became a thing. So I have thought about doing that just to see if there's an audience for that. But I haven't done it. Sleep is so overrated, right, Ursel? Right. Yeah, Tea with Tash, we're going to talk about a lot of things about Bridgerton. Yeah. I feel like reptiles, I feel like there's a typo in your comment. Psilocybin mushrooms grow brain. For sure, they had something to do with the revolution against the psychopaths of the ruling class. Yeah, but that's later. And actually, so the Enlightenment is, there's a big school of thought that attributes the Enlightenment to coffee. Because before coffee houses, the social space to which the average person retired was an inn or a tavern where you drank ale and maybe wine, and or beer. And that would not necessarily stimulate you to more cogent forms of thought. Whereas a coffee house would actually led to an awakening, a literal awakening, where people in their social time, when they're all together with random people from all walks of life, are actually drinking something that stimulates their minds and makes them more awake. And honestly, that really tracks, especially if you look up with the very sudden change in the way people are talking and thinking in the 17th century, second half of the 17th century into the 18th century, which aligns with the arrival of coffee and coffee houses in Europe. So yeah. I cut rocks, you are the historian. Oh, reptiles, thank you. But it's cool that you cut rocks. I think that's super awesome. Which season of Bridgerton do you like the most? I can't really answer that. I haven't finished season 4 yet. They all have things that set my teeth on edge. Possibly season 4 is the one I can tolerate the best at this point. It's just, yeah. We'll talk more about it. If you'd like to talk more about Bridgerton, join us in our Frox Flicks. Monday morning Asia, middle of the night Ear Africa, Sunday to Monday, or Sunday evening, Sunday early to late evening, depending on where you are, Americas. Yeah, you like them equally. You don't. I can tolerate some of them more than others. Yeah, I watch it. I honestly, I've watched it because, do any of you hate watch things? I hate watch Bridgerton. Okay, everyone. If you had questions and I didn't answer them, either save them for the next live stream or pop them in the comments and I will respond to them as long as YouTube shows me the comment, which YouTube sometimes hides comments that it doesn't need to hide. There it is. I love hate watching stuff, right? It's so gratifying. It's so gratifying. I usually hate watch Bridgerton during my morning workouts. It's a good way to get through a workout. You all wonder how I can still wear the clothes I wore when I was 25 years ago. It's because I work out every day, and Bridgerton is part of my workout routine. Comment, question, were there hospitals in the 15th century? Absolutely. And the hospitals were nonprofit organizations. The hospitals in the 15th century in Europe were charitable institutions operated by the church. And they provided healthcare to everyone. They didn't charge for it. They were endowed and paid for either by the church or by wealthy people and aristocrats who wanted to shorten their time in purgatory. And the Reformation is one of the reasons that we have extreme poverty now in the West, because in places where the Reformation really took hold, those charitable institutions maintained by the church were all shut down. And so these institutions that used to provide healthcare and food and jobs and clothing and education for the bottom levels of society vanished in the Reformation, and thus began the real poverty that isn't medieval at all, but is actually an artifact of the modern world. Isn't that lovely? Yay, Reformation. Fuck the Reformation. Fuck it hard. Okay. What's with the outfit? Welcome to my Medieval Living History channel. I am the Contessa, and I'm wearing my 15th century Lululemon. I am a practitioner of medieval living history, a fashion historian, and a reenactor, and this is my reenactment channel. So that's why I'm dressed this way, because this is my medieval sewing party. But communism, yeah, right, T with Tash. Okay, everyone, I'm going to call it there because otherwise I know you're going to keep asking me questions. So tomorrow, medieval cooking party, I hope to see you all there. We'll be exploring 16th century Persian cuisine from the court of Abbas I, Abbas the Great, of the Shah of Persia. Okay, everyone, until next time, may your adventures and learning be creative. Good night, everyone.